Chapter 1615. Suddenly leaving back in Yaoyi Island, in a field full of medicinal herbs, there was a beautiful girl wearing white clothes. She was helping farm some plants. Suddenly she sensed something. She raised her head and gazed into the distance and saw many people, including Lin Feng. Mu Yin rose up in the air. She smiled at Lin Feng and said, "When did you come back?" "We just came back. I brought you some medicinal herbs, I hope they help," said Lin Feng. He had put the herbs he stole from the palace of medicinal kings into a ring, but because he didn't understand herbs at all, he gave them to Mu Yin. "Thank you," replied Mu Yin, smiling in a gentle way as she took the ring. "I have to go and see a few emperors." "Take care, Yin," said Lin Feng. He didn't want to spend too much time there. Then Mu Yin watched as Lin Feng and the others disappeared. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to say something, but she didn't manage to. Instead, she just smiled. Lin Feng went to an island, which wasn't that far away. "Buddy!" shouted Lin Feng. His voice was so loud that the sound waves blew back all the surrounding trees and water. Immediately after, a gigantic demon ape appeared. It was the Great Earth Demon Ape. He smiled after he saw Lin Feng and said, "Did you come to get hurt again?" "You couldn't hurt me 3 years ago already," replied Lin Feng, smiling. The Great Earth Demon Ape was terrifyingly strong, but Lin Feng was too fast. "I brought some friends. I hope you can teach them some things," said Lin Feng, smiling. "Arg!" the Great Earth Demon Ape and Yuan Fei shouted, turning themselves into gigantic apes. The Great Earth Demon Ape was surprised and smiled. "All right, they can stay with me." "And there's someone else," said Lin Feng. Then Xingzhan turned into a beast too. "A horned battle beast." The Great Earth Demon Ape looked at him and said, "It's the first time I've seen one. Their only purpose in life is battle. I can't wait to see how strong he is." "They can stay with you for now, and if you have the time, take them to some of the other emperors," said Lin Feng, smiling. Then his silhouette flickered. Ban Ruo and Li Hin left with him too. Yuan Fei and Xingzhan were beasts, so the Great Earth Demon Ape was a perfect teacher for them. Ban Ruo and Li Hin were different. Ban Ruo was a Buddhist cultivator, so Lin Feng still didn't know which beast was the best teacher for him. Li Hin was a singer, controlling sound wave and illusion abstruse energies. Lin Feng already knew who to take him to. Lin Feng had spent years in Yaoyi Island, so he knew more than most how helpful the beast emperors were. He hoped his friends could stay there to study cultivation, one day breaking through to the Huangqi layer. After a short time, Lin Feng landed on another island. This time he was looking for Hu Yu. "Sister Hu Yu, I would like to ask you something." Hu Yu was an empress, and she was very familiar with the islands. Back then, she had taken him to many places, so maybe she could do the same with Ban Ruo and Li Hin. "Bro, why are you so polite?" asked Hu Yu, smiling. She put her arm around Lin Feng's shoulders, making them look like a couple. Lin Feng was used to her behavior, but he still smiled wryly. "I have 2 friends whom I'm hoping you can help. You know so many emperors in Yaoyi Island, so you can guide them yourself," said Hu Yu, caressing Lin Feng's face. "Tell me, do you want to leave Yaoyi Island?" Lin Feng nodded. "You want to get away from me, you and your little girlfriend," said Hu Yu angrily. Lin Feng suddenly felt awkward. "Sis, Yin and I are just friends. Concerning you, I don't want to leave you, but after what happened with the 9 great celestial castles, I'm worried about the everlasting palace," said Lin Feng. "Little boy, do you need my help?" asked Hu Yu to Lin Feng. The everlasting palace was a terrifying group. They wouldn't attack Yaoyi Island because they were a great imperial force. However, it seemed like the everlasting palace wanted to capture Lin Feng beyond reason. "Sis, I've been to the great imperial everlasting palace, and I saw the everlasting celestial emperor, as well as the new great emperor of the everlasting palace. He thinks I received the teachings of the great imperial everlasting palace," said Lin Feng to Hu Yu. She fixedly stared at him and said, "Darling, this is something very serious, so tell me the truth. Did you get his transmissions?" Lin Feng nodded, leaving Hu Yu speechless for a moment. "Let's go. We have to leave Yaoyi Island immediately," said Hu Yu. She wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng would be involved in such things. "Sis, what about Yaoyi Island?" asked Lin Feng. He was worried about them. Don't worry. After you leave, we'll just say you left, and that we know nothing. Even if people from the everlasting palace come, they can't do anything against us, because we're a great imperial force. Especially considering our leader is not an ordinary beast. Yu grabbed Lin Feng's hand and started flying away. If the great emperor from the everlasting palace came, it would be very difficult to protect Lin Feng. No need to rush. I haven't even talked to Uncle Yu yet, said Lin Feng, smiling wryly. He initially wanted to stay in Yaoyi Island for a few more days. After all, the everlasting palace was extremely far, so they'd need some time to get to Yaoyi. Why would you need to talk to him? I can talk to him for you, said Yu while dragging Lin Feng. Li Hen and Ban Ruo were surprised, so she smiled and said, You two can wait for me. Lin Feng. They were happy to be with Lin Feng, but now he had to leave again. Ban Ruo Li Hen practiced cultivation seriously. One day we'll recreate Tiantai in the great world. By the way, Wuxia is in Sword Mountain. Lin Feng managed to say all that before Yu dragged him away. We will, whispered Ban Ruo and Li Hen. They would practice cultivation like their lives depended on it. Yu and Lin Feng soon landed on a mountain. Mui was there too. Master Mui, I need to leave Yaoyi Island. Are you coming with me or are you staying? Asked Lin Feng. Mui was surprised. Lin Feng wanted to leave already? Master Mui, I think you should come with me actually. Back then, Qi Yunlei said the everlasting palace was looking for me. But maybe the great emperor in the cyan clothes is looking for everyone who had been in the caves in the great palace. It's not safe for us to stay in Yaoyi Island. That's why Sister Yu wants me to leave immediately. Lin Feng didn't tell Mui everything. He had known Yu for 5 years already, so she knew a lot about him. And she was a beast. Beasts weren't interested in deployment spells. Even though Lin Feng and Mui got along well, the everlasting celestial emperor's teachings could make anyone go insane, especially someone who loved deployment spells. Therefore, Lin Feng had decided to keep all this a secret. The everlasting palace is getting involved, said Mui, surprised. Then he added, All right, I'll come with you. I'm happy to have a friend. Let's go. Yu dragged Lin Feng away. They tried not to draw people's attention as they flew away. A few hours later, Lin Feng and Yu arrived at the periphery of the islands, an extremely vast area. Brother Feng, you can leave from here. If you're in danger, you know how to reach me, said Yu, smiling at him. He nodded and smiled. Sister Yu, take care. I'm going to miss you. Come back and see me sometime, said Yu, and then she left. I will, whispered Lin Feng. Lin Feng, where do you want to go? Asked Mui to Lin Feng. Lin Feng shook his head and said, I come from a small world, so I'm not familiar with the great world. I haven't been to many places, and I'm only a cultivator of the 8th Zun Qi layer. I need to travel to break through to the Huang Qi layer. All right, let's leave this place, and we'll find a place for you to break through to the 9th Zun Qi layer, said Mui. Lin Feng was already at the top of the 8th Zun Qi layer, so he still needed to focus on reaching the 9th Zun Qi layer. After you break through to the 9th Zun Qi layer, I'll take you to another place which should be suitable for you, said Mui, smiling. Chapter 16:16. Beast of the night. After Yu left, she gazed into the distance where she saw a light appear before. It was a lot faster than her. She wanted to take Lin Feng even farther, but she saw that light and had decided to go back. I wonder if those are people from the everlasting palace. If they are there very fast, thought Yu. As Yu thought, there was only one person, and that person landed on Yaoyi Island. Yaoyi Island? That person's eyebrows looked like swords. He was wearing a simple robe, and he looked ordinary, but his eyes were as dazzling as stars. He released his godly awareness and inspected the area, every single inch of the area, but he didn't say anything. If someone noticed his presence, then he'd talk. He inspected the area, and several beasts sensed someone was looking at them, but didn't act out about it. Yaoyi Island was an animal's world, so even a strong cultivator like him could only glance around for a bit. After some time he frowned, and his silhouette flickered away. After Yu went back, she landed at the top of a mountain. Her red robe was fluttering in the wind as a light passed in front of her. intriguing her. She was right. It was a strong cultivator from the Everlasting Palace. Maybe other people didn't know, but she did. She completely understood what was going on. If she hadn't taken Lin Feng away just a second before, the situation would have been tragic for him. Yu went to Shen Yu and asked him, using telepathy, "Did you sense that someone was spying on us?" Shen Yu looked at her and said, "I did, but I noticed that he wasn't doing anything, so I didn't pay attention." "It might be someone from the Everlasting Palace," said Yu. Shen Yu frowned nervously. "Don't be nervous, I already took Lin Feng away. He's far away in the middle of the sea. Even if that person is extremely strong, he can't possibly find someone that far," said Yu, still using telepathy. "But if he doesn't find anyone, he might ask us to hand him over. If that happens, we must remain calm and courteous." When Shen Yu saw Yu smile, he nodded. "I know what you mean. We have to observe and be patient." As expected, the strong cultivator spent a lot of time looking for Lin Feng on Yaoyi Island, but he didn't find him. He rose up in the air and noted the spectacular landscape. He then flew above the clouds. The beasts heard something, so they raised their heads and looked towards that guy. "Someone really is spying on us," thought the beasts furiously. They felt that person was extremely strong though. Qingdi Mountain is helping the Everlasting Palace, otherwise, the Everlasting Palace wouldn't have come that fast, thought Shen Yu. "Who crippled my disciples' cultivation in the 9 great celestial castles?" shouted that strong cultivator. His voice resonated throughout the entire region. Shen Yu and Yu glanced at each other, then they rose up in the air. "You two did it?" asked the strong cultivator, looking at Shen Yu and Yu in a cold way. "Master, I did cripple someone's cultivation in the 9 great celestial castles, but that person wanted to capture one of my disciples, a cultivator of the Zunqi layer. I thought that the Everlasting Palace couldn't possibly send a medium-level emperor to capture a Zun cultivator. I thought they were only humiliating the Everlasting Palace, so I crippled his cultivation. Don't blame me," said Yu politely. "Where's the cultivator of the Zunqi layer?" asked the strong cultivator straightforwardly. He didn't really care about Qi Yinlei, his goal was actually Lin Feng. "Master, after we came back to Yaoyi Island he left. I don't know why. I asked him, and he said he wanted to travel to gather experiences and become stronger. We don't know where he went either. Master, why are you looking for a Zoom cultivator? Did anything happen? Maybe we can help you," said Yu in a calm and innocent way. However, the strong cultivator released energies which oppressed Yu. "Release your godly awareness and show me your memories," said the strong cultivator. He didn't believe her, and this matter was too serious. "Master, even though I'm a beast, I'm also a woman. I have many secrets, so you can't inspect my memories," said Yu. She suddenly looked very angry. "Stop," yelled the strong cultivator. He released his godly awareness, wanting to forcefully inspect Yu's memories. However, at that moment, the sky became pitch black. That strong cultivator frowned and glanced around. He couldn't see anything but darkness. "Bestial night," said the strong cultivator from the Everlasting Palace. "You think you can inspect my people's memories as you wish?" said a voice which seemed to come from the darkness. "Her memories contain clues about someone we're looking for. It's important for the Everlasting Palace. If you inspect her memories, let me inspect yours as well," said the voice. The strong cultivator looked angry. He was a great emperor, so how could he let someone inspect his memories? Everybody had secrets, and he was no exception. Since you know that nobody wants to let anybody else check their memories, why do you think you can inspect my people's memories? She told you the person you're looking for is not here. So I came here for nothing. You can choose to stay here too, but you can't touch any of my people," said the voice in darkness. The strong cultivator from the Everlasting Palace looked furious. His Highness the Beast of the Night was an unfathomable cultivator. Very few people had ever seen his real body. Almost nobody even knew what kind of beast he was, and in general people feared him. The Everlasting Palace wants that person. If you find him here, then you can take him with you. I'm giving the Everlasting Palace face, but if you can't find him, then the Everlasting Palace must give me face too by not touching my people. The same applies to the leader of the everlasting palace. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the responsibility for your actions," said the voice in the darkness aggressively. Then, the darkness slowly dispersed, and the sun reappeared. "All right, I'll spend some time here then," said the strong cultivator in a cold way. He was a great emperor, so he could practice cultivation anywhere. He could even spend years there if he wanted to. So he wanted to see if Lin Feng would come back eventually. Huyu took a deep breath. She was amazed. His Highness the Beast of the Night was terrifyingly strong. He could solve any problem, it seemed, and on top of that, it seemed that His Highness the Beast of the Night also knew about Lin Feng. Lin Feng and Muyi were traveling already, so they had no idea about what was going on there. But at least the great emperor didn't know where they were. Chapter 16-17. Goldfire City. 3 months later, very far away from Yaoyi Island, Demon Chi was dashing to the sky from a cave in a mountain range. Boom, boom, boom. Everything around that cave was quaking, even small pieces of stones exploded. Muyi was at the top of a precipice, fixedly staring at the cave in the distance. He was surprised by how powerful that Demon Chi was. He had seen Lin Feng fight with talismans, but he had never really seen how Lin Feng battled. Bang! Another sound resounded through the mountain chain. Even more terrifying Demon Chi rose up to the skies, condensing into clouds. 9th Zun Chi layer. What a terrifying and aggressive demonic energy, thought Muyi. A demon-like silhouette rose up in the sky. His eyes were pitch black, and his long black hair was messy. Lin Feng looked like a demon god. 9th Zun Chi layer, and soon, I'll become a demon emperor, thought Lin Feng, remembering all the emperor's statues. He was getting closer and closer to breaking through to the Huang Qi layer. If he were still in the small world, people would admire him. Lin Feng inhaled and exhaled demon qi for a little while. Then he recalled his demon qi, and his eyes progressively became normal again. Finally, he turned into a handsome young man again. He landed in front of Muyi and smiled happily. "Uncle Muyi, sorry to have kept you waiting." "It's only been about 2 months, I guess. It's not that long," said Muyi, smiling. For a medium-level emperor, a few months were nothing. "Let's not waste time. We continue onwards." "How far are we from Goldfire City?" asked Lin Feng to Muyi. Muyi initially wanted to take him to Goldfire City, which was a gigantic city. It was a lot larger than all of the 9 great celestial castles together. "We're not that far from it. Only 3 days of traveling left. Lin Feng, once we get to Goldfire City, maybe then you will realize how vast that world really is. You will see how magnificent and splendid the city is as well. That city is famous for its weapon manufacturers and its weapon manufacturing groups." Muyi and Lin Feng then left. Lin Feng was smiling. The city of weapon manufacturers. He had never heard of such groups in the small world. "Uncle Muyi, back then, when you saved me, you used a weapon talisman. Was that a talisman from a powerful group in Goldfire City?" asked Lin Feng. Indeed, however, Goldfire City is gigantic and has many such groups. It's divided into 4 parts: east, south, west, and north. Each district has bigger and smaller weapon manufacturing groups. There are probably hundreds of large ones. If you also count the smaller groups and individual manufacturers, then it's probably impossible to know exactly how many there are. However, for a few reasons, I got expelled from such a group a long time ago. That's why I just used the talisman to scare Emperor Nai-chun. I couldn't do much more than that, explained Muyi, smiling and shrugging. If Emperor Nai-chun had known about that, he might have regretted. "I see, you study deployment spells for weapons. That's surprising," said Lin Feng, smiling. "Besides, you are a medium-level emperor and surprisingly, you got expelled from your group. Are there very powerful groups in Goldfire City then?" "Just a little stronger than the 9 great celestial castles. But everyone here are experts at manufacturing weapons. You won't find any great emperor here, because after a weapon manufacturer becomes a great emperor, they immediately leave town. Everyone respects great emperors. So even if some people become great emperors in Goldfire City, they usually go abroad to become stronger," explained Muyi. "Concerning deployment spells, I do study them for weapons. Lin Feng, do you know what a cultivator needs to know to become a weapon manufacturer?" Deployment spells fire, soul, strength, and materials. You're right. That's where the name of this city comes from, Gold Fire City. Fire to fabricate weapons, and gold is a great material to fabricate weapons. Fire and materials constitute the environment. They are necessary elements. However, a powerful soul and a powerful deployment spells make a huge difference. The most difficult part is the deployment spell. Without a powerful deployment spell, you can't make a powerful weapon. Muyi continued. Alchemists and weapon manufacturers had a similar range of knowledge, but weapon manufacturers had to understand deployment spells better than alchemists. Uncle Muyi, why did you take me to Goldfire City? Because of their weapons? Asked Lin Feng. Muyi knew how good Lin Feng was at using deployment spells. If you're interested, you can try and study how to fabricate weapons. Maybe it could be beneficial for you, said Muyi, smiling. It seemed that Muyi had planned things out for Lin Feng. But Lin Feng didn't mind. He was interested in everything, and studying the arts of weapon manufacturing was interesting. They both walked and chatted. Lin Feng understood weapons a little bit better after Muyi finished explaining everything to him. It seemed that many groups in Goldfire City were great imperial forces, and it also seemed that many influential groups were connected to those weapon manufacturing groups. 3 days later, they finally made it to the gigantic city. We're here, said Muyi, smiling at Lin Feng. Goldfire City was different from the 9 great celestial castles. People here are free to move as they wished. Muyi and Lin Feng first went to the city center. They didn't fly, they simply walked on the vast streets. There were many street vendors on the sidewalks, reminding Lin Feng of his previous life. However, in Goldfire City, those street vendors sold weapons. Goldfire City is also a gigantic open market where people trade weapons. Many people have traveled a long way to come here to find materials. You can even buy fire here. Muyi smiled wryly. In the great world, people could buy almost anything, even fire. Do you want to see documents and resources concerning weapon fabrication? Asked Muyi. Where? Asked Lin Feng. Let's go. I'll show you some stuff, said Muyi, smiling. He took Lin Feng to a pavilion and found some bookshelves with very ancient books resting on it. Officials' documents, instruction manuals, and so on. There were stickers everywhere to help people find the resources they needed. Introduction to Weapon Manufacturing. Lin Feng noticed a book, so he stopped and started leafing through it. The book dealt with new technologies and the levels of weapon manufacturers. People who can fabricate holy weapons can't be called masters? They can only be called amateurs? Lin Feng was stupefied. In the small world, holy weapons were considered great weapons. There are various levels of imperial weapons, and those who can fabricate level 1 imperial weapons are called level 1 professors. Those who can fabricate level 9 weapons are called level 9 professors. Only those who are level 6 professors and above can be called weapon manufacturing masters. Finally, only those who can fabricate great imperial weapons can be called great scholastic masters of weapon manufacturing arts. Lin Feng gasped with amazement. He learnt a lot from reading that book. Chapter 1618. Muyi's request. Muyi was reading an ancient book next to Lin Feng, from time to time, glancing at Lin Feng. Uncle Muyi, are there any great scholastic masters of weapon manufacturing arts in Goldfire City? Asked Lin Feng. From what I know, there should be one, said Muyi, smiling. A great scholastic masters of weapon manufacturing arts had a very, very high success rate when manufacturing level 8 and 9 imperial weapons. They could easily create terrifying armies all on their own. Lin Feng nodded and continued reading. Someone next to Lin Feng was reading a book, but when he saw what kind of book Lin Feng was reading, he looked at him mockingly. Lin Feng was probably a beginner in the arts of weapon manufacturing, because nobody would read such books. But Lin Feng didn't care about what people thought of him. He released his godly awareness and inspected some official documents. He was just skimming them though. After some time in the pavilion, he already knew all the basics. Uncle Muyi, let's leave, said Lin Feng to Muyi. Muyi nodded, but when they reached the exit, Muyi had to give the guard a few abstruse tablets. After all, nothing was free in that world. There are always foreigners stopping here, and since so many people come, the price is not too high. The people who manage those libraries must make a lot of money, said Mui to Lin Feng. So what do you think? Are you interested in weapon fabrication or not? Asked Mui smiling. I am a bit interested, but I think it could only be a hobby at best for me. If I want to have a high level in weapon fabrication, I would need to spend a lot of time and energy on it. I don't think it's something suitable for me, explained Lin Feng honestly. I think so too, said Mui smiling. Then he continued. In the world of cultivation, no matter whether you're an alchemist or a weapon manufacturer, there's only one goal: become stronger. People fabricate weapons to become stronger, however, it always requires time. That's why most strong cultivators only want to practice cultivation. However, you're not even 30 yet, and you're still carving out your own path in the great world. You must remember that in the great world, many people break through to the Xianqi layer shortly after their birth. However, even in the great world, getting close to breaking through to the Huangqi layer before 30 is something exceptional already. With your talent and your understanding of deployment spells, you don't really need weapons. We'll see. Maybe someday I'll study weapon fabrication and immediately become a great scholastic master of weapon manufacturing arts, said Lin Feng jokingly. Lin Feng, this time I took you to Goldfire City because I have something in mind, said Mui, gazing into the distance. He seemed pensive. Uncle Mui, you saved my life a few times, so you can tell me what you want, and I'll do my best to help, said Lin Feng. Maybe it had something to do with Mui having been expelled from his group. I would like you to approach someone, said Mui. He seemed moved that Lin Feng wanted to help him. Approach someone? Indeed, my clan. I'm from the Mu clan from the northern part of Goldfire City. It's a very powerful weapon manufacturing clan, and there's a very talented young disciple who is an expert at fabricating weapons. Mu Lin Shui. She's one of the most talented young people there. She has broken through to the 9th Zunqi layer. She's an expert at using fire, and has a powerful soul strength. I hope you can get close to her, said Mui honestly. Lin Feng looked skeptical and asked, Uncle Mui, may I ask you what your relationship with Mu Lin Shui is? She's my daughter, said Mui. Lin Feng looked surprised. Mui had a daughter? And why had he been expelled from the clan? You have to ask her why I got expelled. My daughter is very talented, and she's a good cultivator. She will soon become stronger than me, but the leader of the clan wants to control my daughter's future, said Mui, smiling wryly. Uncle Mui, why do you want me to approach Mu Lin Shui though? Asked Lin Feng. He still didn't understand. It has something to do with a grand meeting that will happen in half a year. After you get close to Lin Shui, you will know what I mean. I took you to Goldfire City for just this. I hope you don't think I'm selfish, said Mui, sounding embarrassed. He had saved Lin Feng from Emperor Nai Chun back then, so that Lin Feng could help him back. Uncle Mui, I will soon become an emperor. No matter where I am, I can become stronger, including Goldfire City. During my time here, I will get to know many weapon manufacturing masters, and I will have a broader knowledge. I don't think that's so bad, said Lin Feng kindly. Thank you, Lin Feng. I'll take you to the Mu clan now, but don't tell her or anyone from the Mu clan that I told you to do this, said Mui. Then, Mui put on a mask Lin Feng had made him use in the 9 great celestial castles. Outside of the Mu clan's territory, there was a vast public square where there were big roads leading to various places. Nostalgia rushed over Mui as he looked at the familiar buildings. He didn't know how Lin Shui was doing since he left. Perhaps she'd changed since then. Uncle Mui, how do I approach her? Asked Lin Feng, smiling wryly. He didn't know her, so getting close to her was easier said than done. She looks proud, but on the inside, she's kind and gentle. If she has the feeling you're a good person, it should be easy to get close to her. Of course, if she hates someone, it's another story. If anything happens, just tell me, said Mui before leaving. Then he smiled and turned around, saying, Lin Feng, if you want to have some fun with my daughter, I don't mind either. Lin Feng smiled wryly. He hadn't thought about that. He missed Meng Qing and Yuxian. But Lin Feng couldn't protect his wives in the great world if he didn't have the strength of the Huangqi layer, so he still had to hide them. Lin Feng looked at the territory of the Mu clan. For some reason he had a headache. He was used to doing things for himself, and he didn't really feel like getting close to someone, but since Uncle Mui asked him for a favor, he'd do his best to help. At that moment, a group of young men and women came out from the Mu clan and frowned. "What are you looking at?" asked a girl in green clothes. She had a furry white cloak which made her look heroic. She was also very beautiful. "I find the Mu clan's territory to be majestic," replied Lin Feng. He had recalled his chi before, so now he looked like an ordinary cultivator at the top of the Zunqi layer. "Even if that's true, don't just stand in front of the main gate," said the girl in a cold way. Then those people passed in front of Lin Feng and left. Lin Feng glanced at them one more time before he entered the Mu clan. He asked to a pedestrian, "Do you know that girl's name?" The pedestrian smiled and whispered, "Brother, she's the jewel of the Mu clan. You can't fall in love with her." "I won't, I'm just asking," said Lin Feng smiling. He figured that the pedestrian was easygoing. "Hee bro, I perfectly understand you. There's no need to justify yourself," said the pedestrian, tapping on Lin Feng's shoulders and smiling in a gentle way. "Qingying, is that guy asking about you?" asked a young man who was smiling at Mu Qingying. Mu Qingying didn't reply. Instead, another young man smiled and said, "In the northern part of the city, many men are interested in her. There's nothing surprising if he is. I'm just amused that some people overestimate themselves," said the one who had just talked before. Then they left. Lin Feng heard them clearly, for they hadn't tried to act discreet. But he didn't care. He needed to learn more about Mu Lin Shui. Chapter 1619. Mu Clan's Guard's Brother, I'll tell you something. Lin Feng turned his head around. The pedestrian was still talking to him. "Do you want to know something about Miss Qingying?" asked that person, smiling. "No, I want to know more about Mu Lin Shui. Do you know anything about her?" Lin Feng shook his head. When the young man heard Lin Feng, he smiled in an even gentler way. His eyes were wide open as he said, "Brother, I think you shouldn't think about her too much. Miss Lin Shui is incredible. I have broken through to the 7th Zunqi layer, and you probably have the same level. But in front of Lin Shui, we're still nothing. I'm just asking. It's not like I'm having any perverted thoughts." "Don't worry, bro," replied Lin Feng. "Miss Lin Shui is the most beautiful girl of the Mu clan. She's only 20 years old, and she's already a cultivator at the very top of the Zunqi layer. And she's very talented at fabricating weapons. She can already create imperial weapons, which means she has become a level 1 professor, but she's studying deployment spells these days. She wants to become a level 2 professor, so she's getting ready for the big contest." That person explained slowly, "Brother, she's a public figure, and that's it to people like us. We can fantasize about her, but we stand no chance. Only the strongest young cultivators from the Yen clan can be a good match for her." "I see, she must be incredible," said Lin Feng. He was impressed. Being a cultivator at the very top of the Zunqi layer, before being 25 was amazing. But in the great world those things didn't seem as astonishing. Lin Feng had even heard of beasts which were born with the strength of the Tianqi layer. They didn't even need to gather experience to become Zun-level beasts, which meant they could easily turn into humans if they wanted. However, he had also heard of some incredible beasts which started very weak, but given enough time, they were even more terrifying. This seemed to be a law of the universe. If people relied on their own strength and luck to become stronger, it would bring about better results than by relying on a powerful and rich family to take pills or solely relying on a blood heritage. "Brother, what if I want to see Miss Lin Shui? What do I have to do?" asked Lin Feng. "That's difficult to say. Miss Lin Shui is studying deployment spells. Unless she comes out now, you'll have to wait to see her," replied that guy, smiling. "Of course, if someone takes you in, you might see her sooner." "Let me in," asked Lin Feng. That was a good idea. Since he wanted to get close to her, he had to get into the buildings first. "Thank you for helping me," said Lin Feng, smiling. The guy smiled and shook his head. "So you really want to get in? I can only wish you good luck. I'm off." After that guy left, Lin Feng didn't leave. Instead, he leant against a wall and closed his eyes. If anyone walked by, they'd probably assume he was asleep. Lin Feng finally opened his eyes after Mu Qingying, and the others came back. Then he approached Mu Qingying. Mu Qingying frowned when she saw Lin Feng. Was Lin Feng purposely preventing her from walking forwards? Miss Qingying, can you take me inside the Mu clan? Asked Lin Feng to Mu Qingying. The people next to her frowned and released qi. One of them even shouted, "Move away!" Mu Qingying waved and said, "For what reason?" Lin Feng nodded. He moved back a few steps and then knelt. Then he raised his hands and released fire strength. Mu Qingying didn't think Lin Feng wanted to attack her, so she continued walking and passed in front of him. But then a light caught her attention, making her turn her head back to see Lin Feng carving marks. Deployment spell. Mu Qingying seemed surprised. Lin Feng was still carving marks until holy marks formed. Then he shook his hand and fire emerged from the marks. Lin Feng raised his head and looked at Mu Qingying. "Since you're so honest, you can become one of my guards. Come with me," said Mu Qingying, walking towards the governmental buildings. Lin Feng lowered his head and looked at the fire marks, smiling indifferently. Then he stood up and followed Mu Qingying. "You're lucky," said one of the young men in a cold way. "A small deployment spell made of only a few holy marks is nothing. In the Mu clan, just about anyone can become a guard." Lin Feng ignored him and continued to follow Mu Qingying. After entering the governmental buildings, his deployment marks outside became wider and wider. They looked mysterious, but unfortunately, Mu Qingying didn't have the patience to watch. In the governmental buildings of the Mu clan, Mu Qingying took Lin Feng to a courtyard. There, a cultivator of the 9th Zunqi layer came to Mu Qingying and bowed. "Miss Qingying." The Mu clan was a large clan, so there were many people who had a similar social status as Mu Qingying. "Mu Xiao, that's my new guard, please arrange everything for him," said Mu Qingying to that person. Then she continued walking. Mu Xiao nodded and smiled at Lin Feng. "Not bad. Miss Qingying hasn't recruited any new guards for a while. What's your name?" "Lin Feng." "Lin Feng, this courtyard is only an outside one, but it's where her guards stay. I'm the leader of the guards, Mu Xiao. That path leads to the inner courtyard where the noble young men and women live. We are not allowed to go there without permission. You must remember that." Mu Xiao quickly explained to Lin Feng. "I became a guard," thought Lin Feng speechlessly. He wouldn't have the opportunity to meet Lin Shui that way. Now he needed to improve his social status to see her. "It seems like it'll take some time," thought Lin Feng. He didn't feel dispirited though. Now that he was in the governmental buildings, his chances of meeting Lin Shui by chance were still higher. Mu Xiao found a place to live for Lin Feng. Even though they were Mu Qingying's guards, they had nothing to do if she didn't leave the clan's territory. With that free time, Lin Feng just practiced cultivation. Sometimes he would chat with the other guards, trying to learn useful things from them. He quickly became acquainted with many of them. Besides, Lin Feng also found out that many of the guards were attracted to Mu Qingying, but nobody had confessed to her. Concerning Mu Lin Shui, they just said that she was way too incredible, and that she didn't mix with people like them. Lin Feng had been in the governmental buildings for 10 days now, but he still hadn't seen Mu Lin Shui. He had seen Mu Qingying only a few times too. Lin Feng wasn't too surprised though. It was because the great tournament at Goldfire Tower would start in 6 months. Young men and women who were younger than 30 years old could participate, and if they did well, they could become disciples of the Goldfire Tower, and would obtain even more weapon manufacturing techniques. According to legends, the Goldfire Tower had a great scholastic master of weapon manufacturing arts. Apart from the opportunity to become disciples of the Goldfire Tower, those who would rank amongst the best ones could also obtain incredible imperial weapons and powerful types of fire. Lin Feng still wondered why Mu Yi had asked him to get close to Mu Lin Shui. Was it because of the tournament? How could he help if so? Did he want Lin Feng to help Lin Shui learn deployment spells? Lin Feng was sunbathing in the courtyard and chatting with all the guards. It was relaxing. The guards were nice and didn't act arrogantly with him. Lin Feng preferred those kinds of people the most. "Miss Qingying is here," said Mu Xiao. Everybody stood up and looked at her, sneaking glances at her stunning figure. It wasn't that surprising that they all fantasized about her. I have a deployment spell, try and carve it, said Mu Qingying, giving a book to Mu Xiao. Then she looked at Lin Feng and said, I know you're interested in deployment spells, which is why I took you in as a guard, but don't relax too much. If in a few months, your deployment spells are like the one from the other day, then I'll fire you. The Mu clan doesn't work with pieces of trash, and that goes double for me. With that, Qingying turned around and left. Mu Xiao smiled at Lin Feng and said, Lin Feng, Miss Qingying asked me if you had asked us for help with your deployment spells, so I told her the truth. That's no problem, said Lin Feng smiling. Did he need them to teach him anything? Chapter 1620. Mu Lin Shui. Mu Xiao smiled apologetically and turned to everybody else. You all heard Miss Qingying. That book contains a deployment spell. Everybody can carve it into some talismans, and I'll give them to Miss Qingying. Now, use your godly awareness to study the deployment spell. Brother Mu Xiao, is Miss Qingying going to choose one of us to help her? Asked one of the guards. Keep dreaming. Even if Miss Qingying wanted to choose one of us to help her, it wouldn't be you. Brother Mu Xiao is much stronger than us when it comes to deployment spells. We can practically congratulate him already, said another one smiling. Indeed, Master Mu Xiao, you'll always be with Miss Qingying in the future. Everybody agreed. Although they were jealous, they were happy for him. Maybe Mu Xiao would make weapons with her soon, and then someday, they'd fall in love. Master Mu Xiao, if you marry Miss Qingying, your future will be incredible, said someone else jokingly. Behave yourselves, you rascals, shouted Mu Xiao, rolling his eyes. Everybody get over here and study the deployment spell. If you take this seriously, you all will have a chance. Mu Xiao gave the book to one of them. That guy looked excited and impatient. Everybody laughed once more before they turned their attention to the book, inspecting it with their godly awareness. Eventually it was Lin Feng's turn. He inspected the book with his godly awareness, and was surprised. That deployment spell wasn't as ordinary as he'd thought. It was quite powerful. When everybody finished inspected the book, Mu Xiao took it back and said, All right, don't waste time. You have 3 days to carve marks. And if you do well, then maybe Miss Qingying will be satisfied. Hee, Master Mu Xiao, you're daydreaming too much, said one of them jokingly. But then he turned around and left. Everybody left, but Lin Feng didn't hurry to leave. He was still enjoying the sun. Lin Feng, why are you not leaving? Asked Mu Xiao. Don't we have 3 days? There's no need to rush, said Lin Feng smiling. Lin Feng, you can't act like that. The more time you have, the better results you'll have. You should use all the allocated time, said Mu Xiao in a moralizing tone. Lin Feng glanced at Mu Xiao in a deep and meaningful way, thinking that Mu Xiao hadn't acted that way during the past few days. Lin Feng smiled on the inside. That deployment spell seemed very important to Mu Xiao. Maybe the best one really would be chosen to stay with Miss Qingying. All right, I'll do my best, said Lin Feng nodding. Then he went to his room. The deployment spell was an offensive deployment spell, just like the shattering deployment spell. Thus, it wasn't very difficult for Lin Feng. He just had to cast a few small deployment spells, and then they'd turn into a larger one. Lin Feng carved the spell in a short time, but he still waited the 3 days before coming out and handing over his talisman to Mu Xiao. Mu Xiao numbered the talismans and said, I remember your numbers. If Miss Qingying likes your talisman, I'll tell you. Master Mu Xiao, don't fool us. Your talisman must be better than all of ours, said the crowd smiling. Mu Xiao then walked to the inner courtyards to give Miss Qingying the talismans. He's going to become rich. He'll stay with Miss Qingying all the time, and maybe they'll even share a room. Said someone smiling and looking at Mu Xiao. Imagine if it happened though, said that person laughing. He glanced at Lin Feng and tapped his shoulder. Lin Feng, I heard you begged Miss Qingying to allow you into the governmental buildings. How does it feel to know that Mu Xiao is going to end up with the woman of your dreams? Lin Feng scratched his head and smiled. I may be a little jealous. Haha. Everybody laughed. At that moment, Mu Xiao was already in the inner courtyard. He went to Miss Qingying and said, Miss, here are the talismans, have a look. Make them explode to show me how powerful they are, said Mu Xiao. All right. Mu Xiao moved back and made them explode. Mu Qingying looked expressionless. Those people had made progress, but it was still far from being enough. Maybe Mu Xiao's talisman would be better though. Boom. At that moment, a terrifying fire dashed to the skies, looking like a fire dragon. Mu Qingying was very surprised. 9 dragons, the carvings are perfect. Mu Qingying was stupefied, and Mu Xiao was too. 9 dragons? How is that possible? That deployment spell. Mu Xiao, you've made progress. Now you can help me, said Mu Qingying to Mu Xiao, who had just come back to his senses. Mu Xiao frowned and looked at Mu Qingying. What's wrong? Asked Mu Qingying. Nothing, replied Mu Xiao. He had many thoughts when he looked at her. His heart was pounding as he said, It's an honor for me to help you. All right, you can move into the inner courtyards with me and live in the room next to mine. I can call you anytime that way, said Mu Qingying. Roger, Mississippi, said Mu Xiao, nodding. He clenched his fists. There was still 1 talisman left, but he was never going to take it out because it was his talisman. Go back, pack and inform the others, said Mu Qingying. If you need anything, just call me. Mu Xiao went back to his room, but he looked strange. People in the outside courtyard were waiting for him. When they saw him come back, they smiled and asked, Master Mu Xiao, how did it go? Practice hard. I may not be here to help you anymore in the future, said Mu Xiao, smiling. Everybody smiled. Master Mu Xiao, don't forget about us in the future. Good luck. Everybody congratulated him, even though they were jealous. Lin Feng looked surprised, but he immediately understood what was going on. He smiled indifferently when Mu Xiao looked at him. Lin Feng, Miss Qingying said you're quite good. You should continue with your efforts. I will, said Lin Feng, nodding. Then Mu Xiao left and packed his stuff. He was going to move to the inner courtyard. Lin Feng was still waiting for an opportunity. Some months passed, and Mu Xiao came to visit them occasionally. At that moment, Mu Qingying was in a courtyard. She stretched her back, making her breasts look even perkier. Mu Xiao was drooling, but when Miss Qingying looked at him, he immediately looked elsewhere. Mu Xiao, you must be tired too, but there's something I still want to talk to you about. Your deployment spells are not as good as before. You need to start making perfect deployment spells like that one day, said Mu Qingying in a grave and solemn way. I understand, said Mu Xiao, nodding. Miss, I want to tell you something. Tell me, said Mu Qingying. On that day, I checked everybody's deployment spells, and although Lin Feng begged you to join us, he's still too weak. His deployment spells are really bad, and he's not interested in learning. I think we should expel him, said Mu Xiao. Mu Qingying remained silent and then nodded. We don't need to keep any trash here. I'll take care of it. Mu Xiao turned around and got ready to leave. Qingying, said a voice in the distance. It was a beautiful woman. She had beautiful long hair, beautiful eyes, she was slim. Miss Lin Shui, said Qingying, smiling at her. Lin Shui, how come you're here? I need one of your guards, said Mu Lin Shui. Mu Qingying glanced at her and said, You should have asked the clan to help you with that. You always rely on yourself after all. Chapter 1621. I'll help you, I'm used to it, said Mu Lin Shui. I know how talented you're though. My guards can't help you, said Mu Qingying. Actually, Mu Lin Shui was right. Nobody could really help her. She didn't really need guards, but she was getting ready for the tournament, so she needed someone to give her new ideas. Let's go. You just can't choose Mu Xiao. He'll be turning 30 this year, and he'll be helping me at the tournament. You can choose anyone else though, said Mu Qingying, smiling. Mu Lin Shui and Mu Qingying were about the same age. However, Mu Lin Shui was much more talented, and even more beautiful. She admired Mu Lin Shui. I understand, said Mu Lin Shui, nodding. Since Mu Qingying wanted Mu Xiao for herself, Mu Lin Shui wasn't going to choose him. Mu Xiao listened to them, and then watched them leave. Mu Qingying was beautiful, but Mu Lin Shui was even more beautiful. 2 beautiful girls together side by side, what a scene. They arrived in the outer courtyard and called the guards. Mu Qingying smiled at Mu Lin Shui and said, Lin Shui, these are all my guards. Mu Lin Shui, Lin Feng looked at Mu Lin Shui, immediately thinking that she was beautiful. She had perfect breasts, but she still looked pure and innocent. The guards didn't even dare look at her. Mu Lin Shui looked at Lin Feng, thinking that he looked handsome and unfathomable. It seemed like he had been through a lot. That was the reason why she immediately took note of him. The others didn't dare look at her, but Lin Feng did. Not only did he just look at her, he continued looking at her in a calm way, as if he didn't seem scared. She looks like Mu Yin, thought Lin Feng. How would Mu Lin Shui react if she knew what he was thinking? Lin Shui, whom do you want? Asked Mu Qingying. The crowd looked nervous. Mu Lin Shui didn't have a single guard, so the one she chose was probably going to stay with her all the time. Just thinking about it made them all feel excited. Lin Feng hoped he would become her guard. That would be the opportunity he had been waiting for. Miss Lin Shui, I would like to become your guard, said Lin Feng. He had to act bold now, otherwise, she might choose one of the others. Mu Qingying looked at Lin Feng. She looked furious as said, Mu Xiao said he wanted you to leave the clan just a few minutes ago. You only joined the clan for me, and now you want to follow Lin Shui. You must be dreaming. You won't become Lin Shui's guard. The Mu clan doesn't need such trash. Lin Feng knew what she meant. He should have become Mu Qingying's guard. But he hadn't tried because he wasn't interested. When Mu Xiao saw that Lin Feng was looking at him, he turned his head. He wanted to expel Lin Feng on his own to avoid any trouble. Lin Feng, you're not a bad deployment spell caster, but you don't make any efforts. I told Miss Qingying you should leave, so please do, said Mu Xiao to Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at him in a cold way. He was starting to get upset. Then he looked at Mu Lin Shui again and said, Miss Lin Shui, I would like to become your guard. How audacious, said Mu Qingying. Back then you begged me to join the Mu clan's government, and I gave you a chance. Now you're just trying to fool Lin Shui in the same way. Qingying, I just need an assistant, not someone to help me with deployment spells. Since you want him to leave, it's perfect. I can take him with me without bothering you, said Mu Lin Shui. Miss Lin Shui, said Mu Qingying. He's a bad guy. He might even be a pervert. Back then, he begged me to join the government. He can't do anything to me, said Mu Lin Shui. All right, said Mu Qingying nodding. She didn't insist on it. She just glanced at Lin Feng in a cold way and said, You better behave yourself. I'm off, said Mu Lin Shui, nodding at Mu Qingying. Then she looked at Lin Feng and said, Let's go. Lin Feng started walking, but when he passed next to Mu Qingying, he stopped for a few seconds and whispered, I never joined the Mu clan for you. Then he followed Mu Lin Shui away. Mu Qingying repeated, You didn't join for me? I see, you wanted to punch above your weight. Lin Feng ignored her. His goal was Mu Lin Shui, and he was finally getting there now. Mu Lin Shui took Lin Feng to her own inner courtyard. Each noble disciple from the Mu clan had their own courtyard. Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui then immediately went to her laboratory, where she fabricated weapons. The room was gigantic. A gigantic cauldron stood out the most, though it looked different from the cauldrons alchemists used. That one was more like an oven in that it could shut. There were several tools on that oven. A hammer, fire tongs were amongst those Lin Feng was familiar with. Why did you want to become my guard? Asked Mu Lin Shui to Lin Feng. She had the feeling that Lin Feng wasn't someone that was easy to understand. At least, she didn't think that he looked like a piece of trash like Mu Qingying said. I didn't want to become your guard, I wanted to help you, said Lin Feng calmly. Mu Lin Shui looked surprised. Even if she thought Lin Feng didn't look like trash, she wouldn't have thought he'd say such a thing. People who were better than her at fabricating weapons could be counted with just one hand. And those people were preparing the tournament, so they couldn't help her. How can you help me? Asked Mu Lin Shui. She was curious. I understand deployment spells, said Lin Feng calmly. Mu Lin Shui looked unhappy and said, I'm like you, I'm proud, but I've never said that I understand deployment spells. Maybe we have different ways of talking, but at least the deployment spells I understand can help you, said Lin Feng. Mu Lin Shui looked excited now. She just said, All right, since it's that way, I'll give you one opportunity to prove it. Go out and get some materials for me. Use this ring to buy some things. When you come back, we'll start fabricating weapons. Chapter 1622. Fabricating imperial weapons. Lin Feng went to town, and when he came back, Mu Lin Shui was right where he left her. The only difference now was that it was scorching hot inside. Inside the oven, there was a fire with 5 colors, and Mu Lin Shui was controlling that fire. Lin Feng watched her, studying how she moved her fingers in the fire. Mu Lin Shui possessed a bestial-like fire. It was wild and fierce as it continued to grow hotter. "Did you get everything?" asked Mu Lin Shui to Lin Shui without turning her head. "I have everything," said Lin Feng, throwing the ring at Mu Lin Shui. She wasn't facing Lin Feng, but when the ring neared her back, she still managed to catch it from behind. In a flash, all the items appeared outside of the ring. "Look at that deployment spell, and when the right time comes, carve the marks. I hope I won't be too disappointed, otherwise, you won't have a second chance," said Mu Lin Shui calmly. It was exhausting for her to prepare the items. Besides, the materials she used were very expensive, so if the deployment spell failed, she wouldn't be very happy with Lin Feng. With that, she threw a book at him. "I will do my best." Lin Feng nodded and took the book. He inspected it with his godly awareness and studied the marks. Very quickly he reopened his eyes. A short time after, Mu Lin Shui put more materials in the fire. There were many techniques to fabricate weapons, and weapon manufacturers could either use existing techniques or make up new ones. However, relying on one's own techniques was very difficult, because it was difficult to know what items and materials to use. It was a process of trying repeatedly before succeeding. Most masters didn't try that. They usually tried to modify an existing technique. Sword, thought Lin Feng. The weapon still didn't have a shape, but he could tell that it was going to be very sharp. "Carve the marks," shouted Mu Lin Shui suddenly. Lin Feng immediately moved to the cauldron, and even though it was scorching hot, Lin Feng practiced fire cultivation, so it didn't affect him. Lin Feng released earth abstruse energy to the carve marks, which were incredibly clear. They almost looked alive. Earth abstruse strength. I can change the shape of the weapon based on the energy used to carve the formations. With earth energy, we can make a heavy sword, thought Mu Lin Shui. Mu Lin Shui couldn't wait to see what kind of weapon they'd managed to make. Lin Feng kept shaking his hands. Each time, the marks etched themselves onto the weapon. Progressively, heavy energies weighed down on the air around them. Mu Lin Shui started looking at it in a strange way. He modified the deployment spell I gave him, and is using his own marks, thought Mu Lin Shui. She was wondering whether Lin Feng had thought of modifying it when he read the book, or if he changed it on the spot. Changing the deployment spell could have dramatic consequences. Although it was more complicated, if Lin Feng really changed it on the spot, then he really might have a chance at helping her. More and more marks appeared. Now destructive energies were invading the space around them. Mu Lin Shui looked pensive. She was wondering what kind of weapon would be suitable for that deployment spell. Mu Lin Shui initially wanted to make a Peerless holy weapon, thinking it would be easier for Lin Feng. But now her plans were changing. After Lin Feng changed the deployment spell, she had decided to change the weapon, maybe making it into an imperial weapon. Lin Feng continued carving marks, eventually carving the last one. A terrifying strength filled the room after the last mark was drawn. If Lin Feng had carved those onto a talisman, it would have been enough to threaten a low-level emperor. With Mu Lin Shui's experience, that weapon could be terrifying. After Lin Feng carved the marks, Mu Lin Shui nodded at him with a smile which said that she acknowledged Lin Feng's talent. Mu Lin Shui added some materials in the fire, and after that, she used a gigantic hammer to give it a better shape. Ding! A loud clanking sound resounded each time her hammer fell. Lin Feng smiled. He thought that a beautiful woman using a hammer was a funny scene. "I'll help you," said Lin Feng to Mu Lin Shui. "Lin Feng, that's the dancing wind hammer technique. It's not suitable for you. I'll help you learn another hammer technique. But no matter which hammer technique you use, the goal is to make the weapon perfect. Just watch and learn," said Mu Lin Shui, still hammering the weapon. Lin Feng nodded. Accepting that he had no experience, he agreed that the hammer technique wasn't suitable for him. How interesting, thought Lin Feng. He was captivated, but not by her body, but by her movements. Each movement was important, contributing to the overall strength and precision of each strike. Even with her skill, the chances of failing were quite high. An average level 1 professor had a 70% chance of failing while making imperial weapons. When she makes weapons, she's controlling the intensity of the fire as she slowly defines the shape of the weapon, thought Lin Feng. Now it made more sense as to why a powerful soul and fire was required. After hammering the weapon for what seemed to be 1,000,000 times, a strong wind blew throughout the room. It didn't affect Lin Feng though. He was still focused on what was going on. He wanted to make sure that the weapon was perfect. The weapon is almost finished, said Mu Lin Shui to Lin Feng. The fire became even hotter at this point. Lin Feng looked at her face, noticing that they were both covered in sweat. It's much more complicated than concocting pills. But weapons serve a different purpose in battles, as they can help cultivators make up for their deficiencies, thought Lin Feng. Time passed, and then the sword started shaking. Even the room around them started shaking. Mu Lin Shui didn't stop focusing. They were only one step away now. Rise, said Mu Lin Shui, raising her head. Condense. Mu Lin Shui shook her hands, and the fire marks flew throughout the weapon. The scene was incredible. It was the first time Lin Feng had seen something like that. Finally, the sword rose up and whistled. It seemed heavy, destructive, and sharp. We did it, said Mu Lin Shui, smiling in a resplendent way. She looked at Lin Feng and said, We did it, it's a level 1 imperial weapon. You should clean yourself up. Lin Feng said, glancing at her clothes. She wasn't wearing much, and since she was drenched in sweat, anyone could see through her clothes. Lin Feng was getting turned on. Mu Lin Shui looked embarrassed. Usually, she was always alone when she fabricated weapons, so this was the first time a man was with her when she looked like this. I'll go and change my clothes, said Mu Lin Shui, leaving hastily as if she had forgotten about the imperial weapon. Lin Shui made another imperial weapon, said an old man at that moment. He looked pleasantly surprised. Even though Mu Lin Shui was a level 1 professor, making an imperial weapon still wasn't easy for her. At that moment, Mu Qingning was in the air when she saw the imperial weapon. She thought to herself, I wonder when I'll be able to make imperial weapons. Lin Shui is too talented. She only relies on herself and still manages to make such powerful weapons. Chapter 1623. Working in team. Mu Lin Shui changed clothes and came back. She now looked clean and beautiful. She smiled at Lin Feng and said, Let's go and see. Then, they both rose up in the air and looked at the sword. Come, said Mu Lin Shui to the sword. In a flash, it flew to her hand, whistling as it went. Bzzz bzzz bzzz. The sword kept shaking. Then it left Mu Lin Shui's hand and moved to Lin Feng. It turned around him and whistled even louder. Lin Feng looked surprised, noticing that the sword possessed a soul. Lin Shui and Lin Feng had made it together, so they could easily modify it if they wanted to. Lin Shui, you became even better at making weapons, said a middle-aged man who walking to Mu Lin Shui while smiling. Uncle, said Mu Lin Shui, nodding at the middle-aged man. She didn't say too much. If you continue improving like this, you'll soon be able to make level 2 imperial weapons. But right now, you're still not stronger than Yin Feng, especially comparing your fires. Besides, he also has someone to help him with deployment spells. He can make level 3 imperial weapons. So if you can, I hope you'll participate in the tournament in a team with him. You'd be a perfect match, said the middle-aged man. However, Mu Lin Shui frowned and said, I'm a member of the Mu clan. Why would I join with Yin Feng? He's a good boy for you, Lin Shui. You want me to join the Yin clan and help him? You only want him to be my master, said Mu Lin Shui in a cold way. Why don't you make your daughter leave the clan instead? The middle-aged man groaned coldly and said, When the tournament finishes, if you lose, you'll have to marry him no matter what. After I leave, your daughter will get the best education. Am I right? Said Mu Lin Shui. That's enough, said an old man. He glanced at them firmly. Then he said to Mu Lin Shui, Lin Shui, you know about Sword Mountain and the Yin clan. They fabricate weapons exclusively for Sword Mountain, so they can very easily oppress our clan. Yin Feng likes you, so there's a lot of pressure on our shoulders to wed you. I know, Grandpa, but you know how evil that guy is, replied Mulin Shui. But if I don't give the Yin clan face, they will oppress us even more, because they will have an excuse. Of course, the clan is trying to help you, which is why we've determined some rules. If you win, you can do whatever you want, and the clan will make great efforts to make you become even stronger. There are only a few months left before the tournament, so we need to try and find someone who can help you with deployment spells. I understand. Thank you for showing your willingness to help, replied Mulin Shui bowing. But you don't need to find a deployment spell caster to help me. I'm good on my own. You're so stubborn, said the old man smiling wryly. Since that's what you want, I won't insist. The old man thought that Mulin Shui was going to lose this time. The genius from the Yin clan was too good. Even on his own, he could make great weapons. It was rumored that he was already a level 2 professor. Mulin Shui didn't mention Lin Feng, because she didn't know if Lin Feng could help her win against Yin Feng yet. She still needed to see how good Lin Feng could really be. Lin Shui, if you make great efforts, you'll win, said Mu Qingning smiling. Thanks, said Mulin Shui nodding. Mu Qingning glanced at Lin Feng and asked, Lin Shui, did he offend you? Don't worry, said Mulin Shui shaking her head. She took the sword and gave it to Lin Feng. Then she smiled and said, Take the sword. No need, it's not useful for me, said Lin Feng, shaking his head. There were many types of holy weapons and imperial weapons. Lin Feng already had an empty space robe and the scepter. Those weapons were very difficult to make and even harder to replace. An ordinary imperial weapon like this wasn't any better than Lin Feng's talismans. All right, I'll ask someone to clean the laboratory, so you can have a rest, said Mulin Shui, smiling at Lin Feng. You can walk around, just don't go to other people's courtyards. Mulin Shui then rose up in the air and left. Lin Feng had nothing to do, so he just walked in circles in Mulin Shui's courtyard. Uncle Mui, I'll do my best to help Lin Shui defeat Yin Feng. I hope this is what you wanted me to do, said Lin Feng looking at the sky. Mulin Shui eventually came back and walked over to Lin Feng, whispering, I wouldn't have thought that you would be so good at deployment spells. Why would you want to be an ordinary guard in the Mu clan? Lin Feng looked at her, infatuated in her beauty. He smiled and said, If I told you I came here because of you, would you believe me? Mulin Shui looked surprised but smiled and said, Mu Qingning was right, you're a bad boy. It doesn't matter, she thinks I joined the Mu clan for her. But actually, she means nothing to me, said Lin Feng. Then he asked, By the way, how far is Sword Mountain from Goldfire City? It's not that far. It's in a mountain range away from the city. The Yin clan makes swords exclusively for their cultivators. I see. Lin Feng nodded. I know some people in Sword Mountain. One of them is a girl, and she has the same name as you. But her family name isn't Mu, it's Lin. Her name is Lin Shui. What a coincidence. Mulin Shui was surprised and asked, How did you meet her? I have another friend who's a cultivator in Sword Mountain, and he's Lin Shui's fellow disciple. I saw them together before, said Lin Feng, referring to Wuxia. Maybe you can introduce them to me at some point. By the way, here is a hammering technique. It's good that you know Earth Strength. It can be especially useful for you. That hammer technique can help me out a lot. Since you came here for me, I guess you can ask me any questions you have, said Mulin Shui, handing a book over to Lin Feng. Then she smiled in a gentle way. Of course, said Lin Feng smiling. He was willing to help her. Lin Feng practiced the hammer technique for 3 days before he started helping Mulin Shui refine her weapons again. A month later, inside the lab, deployment mark strength filled the room. Each time Lin Feng hammered down, loud banging sounds resounded, fires jumping in every direction. Lin Feng was finally getting used to it. Mulin Shui controlled the fire and the materials which were burnt. In that month, Lin Feng and Mulin Shui's weapons were becoming better and better. They didn't even need to talk to each other anymore. Their teamwork was perfectly coordinated. Fire rise, said Mulin Shui. Fire moved in every direction, magma gushing out of the cauldron. Lin Feng continued hammering the weapon into something flat and extremely heavy. Finally, once they finished, an incandescent sword appeared in front of them. Peerless holy weapon, almost an imperial weapon. It's just because we used ordinary materials, Mu Linxue said, smiling happily. Then she looked at Lin Feng. They worked well together. They could even make peerless holy weapons as they wished, as well as imperial weapons if they used better materials. Thank you, Lin Feng, Mu Linxue said to Lin Feng. He was covered in sweat, so she stretched out her hand and wiped his sweat away with her sleeve. Lin Feng was embarrassed. I told you. I came to the Mu clan for you, said Lin Feng, smiling. I'll continue using you as my slave then, said Mu Linxue, smiling teasingly. They were getting closer every day. They were joking all the time now. As you wish, said Lin Feng, shrugging. Let's go get some better materials. We need to use our full strength next time, said Mu Linxue, smiling. She wanted to see if they could make level 2 imperial weapons now. Said Lin Feng to Mu Linxue. Mu Linxue smiled at him in a resplendent way and said, Right, everything will be all right. Then, they continued walking. However, Mu Linxue couldn't manage to calm down. She was happy with Lin Feng, but they still weren't strong enough. Yin Feng was already a level 2 professor, and maybe he'd be able to make level 3 imperial weapons at the tournament. Mu Qingying glanced at Lin Feng and said to Lin Xue, Sister Lin Xue, don't let insignificant people fool you. How come Lin Feng was so close to Mu Linxue? Mu Linxue glanced at Mu Qingying and shook her head. But Lin Feng smiled and said, That applies to you even more than me. Don't let insignificant people fool you. Mu Xiao looked furious. Since when did scumbags get so determined? Said Mu Qingying in a cold way. Then, she walked to Mu Linxue and pushed Lin Feng backwards. At the same time she said, Sister Lin Xue, I know you're a kind person, but don't let him fool you. He begged me to join the Mu clan back when. Don't worry, I'm a grown-up and can make my own decisions, said Mu Linxue, smiling wryly. She wanted to defend Lin Feng, but it was better to hide her feelings. She hoped Lin Feng and her would amaze everyone at the tournament. Then the four of them went to Goldfire City Market. Mu Linxue had prepared lots of things to trade. Fate seeds, peerless holy weapons, imperial weapons. She really hoped Lin Feng and her could manage to make level 2 imperial weapons together with the materials they bought there. After half a day, Mu Linxue had found everything she needed. She wanted to go back, but at that moment, 3 people appeared in front of them. One of them had an ancient sword on his back, and he was walking towards her. It was an emperor, a sword emperor. The 2 people on his sides also had swords resting on their backs. People from Sword Mountain, Mu Linxue thought. Then she said, Master, I'm Mu Linxue. I've never offended Sword Mountain. Miss Linxue, you haven't indeed. But the 2 people behind you offended Yin Feng, so they must die, said the Sword Emperor. Mu Xiao was scared. He hadn't thought that Yin Feng would do that to them. Although he was upset, he couldn't do much. If Sword Mountain wanted to kill him, they could. Master, you're an emperor from Sword Mountain. How could you kill 2 little boys? Asked Mu Linxue calmly and indifferently. Of course I won't attack. I only came to ensure your safety. My partners will kill those boys. All right, make them fight then, said Mu Linxue calmly. Linxue. Mu Qingying looked upset. Mu Linxue didn't care about Lin Feng, but Mu Qingying cared about Mu Xiao. How could she let him die? Sister Lin Xue, I like people like you. Why are you 2 still not attacking? Said the emperor to his 2 partners. Then, they both fused with their swords and flew forwards. Mu Xiao, said Mu Qingying. Suddenly, terrifying abstruse energies filled the space around them. Lin Feng moved back with incredible speed. Qingying was surprised that bastard was escaping. Dong. Lin Feng suddenly jumped forwards, and a gigantic stone enveloped him with Mu Xiao and the 2 attackers. Now everybody around them couldn't see them. His eyes suddenly became pitch black as he condensed demon and death abstruse energies. Uff. The one who was attacking Lin Feng started shaking after he saw Lin Feng's eyes. Die. When Mu Xiao saw that the cultivator attacking them had stopped moving, He released his own fire energies. However, his fire didn't affect the cultivator too much. Lin Feng's death energy had already caused a lot of damage. Lin Shui doesn't want me to show how strong I am, thought Lin Feng. He said to the other sword cultivator, using telepathy here. That person looked at Lin Feng, staring into his eyes. Then demon death and cursing abstruse energies started corrupting his body. After having broken through to the 9th Zunqi layer, Lin Feng's best abstruse energies were demon, earth, death and cursing abstruse energies. Few people could resist him who were at the same level. Lin Feng's attack allowed Mu Xiao to use his fire. After a short time, the stone disappeared, and the two sword cultivators had already died, burnt alive by Mu Xiao's fire. Chapter 1625. Mu Xiao's plot. They're dead. The Sword Emperor was astonished. He hadn't cared to watch the battle, because he'd assumed his companions would make easy work of the two guards. Mu Qingying was also surprised. She was looking at Mu Xiao, wondering when Mu Xiao had become that strong. Of course, she didn't even consider that Lin Feng had done anything. She just thought he had tried to run away. Mu Lin Shui wasn't surprised. She knew that Lin Feng's abstruse energies were terrifying. That's why she agreed to the fight in the first place. Master, what are you doing? You can't get angry because of their battle, right? Said Mu Lin Shui after she noticed the emperor was upset. Very good, said the Sword Emperor in a cold way. He wanted to kill Lin Feng and Mu Xiao right then, but he turned into a light and left. 2 disciples from Sword Mountain had died against 2 guards from the Mu clan. This was an embarrassment. Let's go back, said Mu Lin Shui to Lin Feng and Mu Xiao. Then the 4 of them left. Mu Qingying walked to Mu Xiao and said something. She looked curious. She wanted to know how Mu Xiao had won. Mu Lin Shui and Lin Feng went to the lab. Mu Lin Shui gave a book to Lin Feng and said, "This time, I want to make an imperial armor. The deployment spell for it is in here, so have a look." Lin Feng nodded and inspected the book. Each time, before Mu Lin Shui started making weapons, they agreed on everything so that they could make the best weapon possible. I can make that deployment spell better. I just hope it will be suitable for the armor, said Lin Feng. Mu Lin Shui smiled and said, "It seems like you've never used your full strength then." "You haven't either," said Lin Feng. Then they both laughed. Mu Lin Shui then looked at Lin Feng in a serious way and said, "Let's get serious. Let's see if we can make weapons at a higher level." "I will never refuse your requests," said Lin Feng smiling. "Thank you, Lin Feng." Mu Lin Shui nodded. She could see that Lin Feng was being honest and kind-hearted. She didn't ask him anything. Lin Feng just told her everything she needed to know. "Let's start. You do you, especially if you can improve the spell. I really hope we can succeed," said Mu Lin Shui. After discussing the details, Mu Lin Shui released her fire. This time, her fire was brighter than ever. Lin Feng could sense how incredible her fire was, which implied that her soul was probably very powerful as well. Mu Lin Shui made the gold melt. Then she dipped it and polished it. Each of her movements were very precise. Lin Feng calmly watched her. Then he started carving deployment marks. They were making an armor this time. So Lin Feng didn't use a shattering deployment spell, but a defensive one. He was an expert at casting offensive deployment spells, but not defensive deployment spells. No matter, he still did his best. He changed the deployment spell again. It looked amazing. It's almost a pity to cast such an incredible defensive deployment spell on this armor. I wonder if it'll be perfect for the armor though, thought Mu Lin Shui as she watched Lin Feng. It was the first time she saw Lin Feng so focused, because he was trying harder this time. It was also taking him longer to draw the marks. Mu Lin Shui was filled with anticipation. With a great deployment spell and great materials, what would their imperial armor look like? In another courtyard in another lab, Mu Qingying and Mu Xiao were also trying to create an imperial weapon. It was the first time they had tried. Mu Qingying was covered with sweat. Her cauldron was surrounded by a dazzling fire. Mu Xiao had just finished carving deployment marks, was now hammering away at the weapon. They were trying to make a big blade, and they were almost done. Mu Qingying was nervous. She knew that if she wanted to participate in the tournament, she had to get better. It wasn't that there were a limited number of people allowed to participate. It was that the Mu clan wouldn't let people go if they weren't good enough. Otherwise, they would end up humiliating them. The blade was looking better and better. It was already starting to emit buzzing sounds. Like most people, she could only make swords and blades. She didn't have the knowledge or the power to fabricate special weapons, such as scepters or ancient mirrors. Finally, the blade twinkled. It even looked bloodthirsty. "Condense," said Mu Qingying. Lights rose up to the skies, piercing through the ceiling of their room. An imperial weapon. Mu Qingying was pleasantly surprised. She had finally made an imperial weapon. "Qingying, we did it," said Mu Xiao happily. He had helped Mu Qingying fabricate an imperial weapon. Even though he had initially cheated to become her personal assistant, he still worked hard to prove to her that he was worth it. He spent most of his time studying. He knew that the only way to make Qingying fall in love with him was to improve his contributions. "Indeed, we did it," said Mu Qingying, smiling in a resplendent way. When Mu Xiao saw her resplendent smile, he slowly walked towards her and put his hands on her cheeks. It looked like he wanted to wipe the sweat from her forehead. "Qingying, you're really beautiful." Mu Qingying shivered and suddenly her facial expression changed drastically. "How shameless." Mu Xiao's facial expression suddenly changed too as he jumped backwards. "Qingying, Mu Xiao, you've gone too far," shouted Mu Qingying. Mu Xiao's heart twitched as he said, "Miss Qingying, you're too beautiful, and I've liked you for so long. I'm crazy about you. I wouldn't have made such efforts if it weren't for you. I know that my social status is low, and I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry for upsetting you. I know what I have to do." "Miss, take care," said Mu Xiao, slowly walking backwards. Then he turned around and left. Mu Qingying was giving him a cold stare. They had already fabricated an imperial weapon, and now there wasn't much time left before the tournament. So Mu Qingying couldn't let him go. "Stop." Mu Qingying calmed down and took in a breath. "Do you need me to do anything else, Miss?" Mu Xiao asked. "You can't go," said Mu Qingying. "If I hadn't done that, I would have continued secretly dreaming about you. But now I made a mistake and you despise me. I can't stay. If you want to kill me, I'll understand," said Mu Xiao, lowering his head. He was trying to look like victim to force Mu Qingying's hand. By now there were many people gathered outside her lab. Mu Qingying had surprisingly made an imperial weapon. "Qingying, you did it," said someone who was pleasantly surprised. It was Mu Qingying's father. "Mu Xiao," I reacted too aggressively. "I don't despise you, I actually like you. Please forget about my outburst before. I went too far, so I'm sorry," said Mu Qingying in a low voice. "What you mean to say is that you want to be with me?" asked Mu Xiao, staring at Qingying. "I need some time to think about it, all right?" asked Mu Qingying. "I will do everything for you. I would even die for you," said Mu Xiao. Chapter 1626. Efforts. Mu Qingying was confused and had mixed feelings. She hadn't thought Mu Xiao would do that, and she had never thought Mu Xiao would ever become her boyfriend. Even though she wasn't as amazing as Mu Lin Shui, she was still very beautiful, and she could get a much better boyfriend if she tried. However, she knew what kind of threat Mu Xiao would pose her if he left now. "Let's go out and greet everyone," said Mu Qingying, avoiding the topic. Then she ran towards everyone who were currently inspecting the weapon she just made. They all smiled pleasantly when they saw Mu Qingying come out. "Qingying, congratulations. Now you're a real weapon artisan." "Qingying, it seems like you're going to be able to participate in the tournament." Everybody was complimenting Qingying. Some people were jealous too, especially anyone who was around the same age as her. Mu Qingying had made an imperial weapon, which meant she'd surely be able to make it to the tournament, meaning less opportunities for them to be qualified. "Father," said Mu Qingying. She was looking at a middle-aged man and smiling in a resplendent way. "Qingying, not bad. You're even catching up with Lin Shui. You'll certainly participate in the tournament now," said Mu Qingying's father. Mu Qingying almost forgot about what happened with Mu Xiao a moment before, because she was so very happy. Everyone was flattering her, and she couldn't get enough of it. She had been jealous of Mu Lin Shui, but she just never showed it. Now, She felt like she could be treated like Mu Lin Shui. I really don't deserve so much praise, father. Sister Lin Shui has been making imperial weapons for a long time already, said Mu Qingying smiling. You're all level 1 professors now, so it doesn't matter whether she's been doing it for a while or not, said her father. // Strange sounds and a terrifying qi were coming from Mu Lin Shui's courtyard. Then, her laboratory exploded, dazzling lights lighting up the night sky. With those lights, a dazzling armor appeared in the sky. Level 2 imperial weapon, the quality of it is incredible too. The crowd was astonished. Someone had made a level 2 imperial weapon. Then, 2 silhouettes rose up in the air. One was the most beautiful woman of the Mu clan, Mu Lin Shui. Mu Qingying's father was dumbfounded. He had just said that his daughter was as talented as Mu Lin Shui. But a few minutes later, Mu Lin Shui already proved she was more talented by creating a level 2 imperial weapon. Mu Qingying was just as stunned as her father. She initially looked happy, but now she looked dispirited. Lin Shui could already make level 2 imperial weapons. Miss, we still have time to try and make level 2 imperial weapons, said Mu Xiao. Mu Qingying turned around and nodded. Indeed, we still have time, so we need to try as well. More strong cultivators gathered, including many older people. Making level 2 imperial weapons under the age of 30 was something incredible. Even in the Mu clan, only 2 people could do that. And the other one was even older than Mu Lin Shui, almost 30. Lin Shui, I will get even better materials for you. If you need someone to help you, just ask, and I will help you find someone, said Mu Lin Shui's second grandfather. No need, I can do it myself, said Mu Lin Shui shaking her head. Finding someone better than Lin Feng was impossible. Even if she did find someone, they wouldn't help her like Lin Feng. Weapon craftspeople were proud, and they didn't like doing things for other people for free. Even though she didn't know why Lin Feng was so good to her, at least she knew he was honest and kind-hearted. That was enough. All right, replied her second grandfather. She was stubborn and expected this answer. However, even if she could make level 2 imperial weapons now, it still wasn't enough to defeat Yin Feng. All right, everybody can disperse, said the old man waving. With that, everybody left, even the people around Mu Qingying left. Mu Qingying went to Mu Lin Shui and smiled. Sister Lin Shui, congratulations. You're a level 2 professor. If you found someone who could help you, you'd be able to beat Yin Feng. I will do my best. Qingying, you've improved as well. You just made an imperial weapon. We still have time, so let's do our best, said Mu Lin Shui smiling. Then, she took the armor and said to Lin Feng, take the armor. Mu Qingying took in a deep breath of surprise. Lin Shui wanted to give Lin Feng a level 2 imperial weapon? Miss Lin Shui, said Mu Qingying unhappily. What had that perverted bastard done to Lin Shui? Did he make her take drugs against her will? Lin Feng initially wanted to refuse, but when he saw Mu Qingying's reaction, he smiled and took it. Thank you. She also didn't think that Lin Feng would take it, but then Mu Lin Shui said, all right, Qingying, you can leave. I have things to do. Mu Qingying's mouth was wide open. She was astonished, but finally, she nodded and said, I'm also going to make more weapons. Sister Lin Shui, be careful. After Mu Qingying left, Mu Lin Shui smiled at Lin Feng and shook her head. Lin Feng, Qingying is not a bad person. She just doesn't understand you. Lin Feng smiled and nodded. Mu Qingying was from a noble and powerful clan. Even though she was talented, she hadn't traveled much. She was spoiled growing up that she had developed a bad temper. Lin Feng had no time to waste with such people. He wasn't her dad. Just beware of Mu Xiao, said Lin Feng indifferently. Mu Lin Shui turned around. Beware of Mu Xiao? It seemed like she had to warn Mu Qingying if Lin Feng was serious. Mu Lin Shui looked at the cauldron and said, a level 2 imperial weapon isn't enough. We have to stabilize our knowledge, and then continue improving. Lin Shui, said Lin Feng. First, think of what imperial weapon you want to make at the tournament. Then, let's see what deployment spell we need. I still need to practice and improve my deployment spells. I should mention that I didn't use my full strength for that armor. I can even do better than that, said Lin Feng to Mu Lin Shui. He knew the 3,000 great deployment spells from a great emperor. How could that be the best he had? He just needed Mu Lin Shui to know exactly what she wanted to do, and then he'd think of the deployment spell he could use. With some practice, he could figure it out before the tournament. Mu Lin Shui looked surprised. His deployment spells could be even more powerful? Lin Feng, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, said Mu Lin Shui smiling. You keep thanking me, said Lin Feng smiling wryly before he joked. Since I keep telling you not to thank me, but you continue to anyways, how should I go about asking you to stop thanking me? Mu Lin Shui's eyes twinkled and she said, maybe we could have sex? Would you dare? Lin Feng was dumbstruck. He smiled wryly and said, I wouldn't dare. First, tell me what imperial weapon you want to make. I'll go for a walk while you decide. Mu Lin Shui looked at Lin Feng and smiled. She was thinking, you little cutie. You came to the Mu clan just to help me, and I thought you really liked me. But now I tried to offer you sex and you ran away. She leant against the wall and daydreamed about Lin Feng. Now she had to think of which weapon she wanted to make. Lin Feng had told her he could make even better weapons. So if she used her full strength, used the best fire, and the best materials, maybe then she would be able to make a level 3 imperial weapon. If that happened, then maybe she could win against Yin Feng. Time passed, and the date of the event was quickly approaching. There were only 7 days left before Lin Feng finally came out of his room. As the sun shone upon him, Lin Feng closed his eyes and took in a deep breath of fresh air. Finally you came out, said Mu Lin Shui, smiling in a cute way. I'm done. Should we try to make a level 3 imperial weapon? I think it'll be easy, said Lin Feng. No need. We should rest and save our energy before the competition, said Mu Lin Shui. Then she got closer to Lin Feng, smiled and said, Lin Feng, my life is in your hands. Chapter 1627, Evil Scheme. Lin Feng, my life is in your hands. Lin Feng looked at her resplendent smile. Then he smiled back and asked, what kind of weapons can Yin Feng make with an assistant? Yin Feng can make level 2 weapons on his own. With an assistant, he might be able to make level 3 imperial weapons of higher quality, said Mu Lin Shui. She was a bit worried because everybody knew about Yin Feng's skill in the northern part of Goldfire City. He was an outstanding young man, while the Yin clan was rich and powerful. So it was no surprise that he had access to the best materials. Level 3 imperial weapons, whispered Lin Feng. Then, he caressed Mu Lin Shui's head and smiled, leave it to me. Mu Lin Shui rolled her eyes and walked away. She looked embarrassed, and after Lin Feng noticed, he laughed and said jokingly, didn't you want to have sex with me? Mu Lin Shui grinded her teeth after she heard Lin Feng. She knew he was only getting his revenge. Both of them sat down. Lin Feng closed his eyes, letting the sun warm his body. And after a few minutes of relaxing like this, he started dreaming. Mu Lin Shui watched Lin Feng without saying anything. She was surprised, wondering what he was doing. Was he resting? Had he really joined the Mu clan just for her? Why was Lin Feng helping her? The sun gradually moved westwards, and everything became dark, but Lin Feng was still motionless. Mu Lin Shui was still not that far from him. She had calmed herself down a bit, but it'd be a lie to say she was completely at peace. In the courtyard next to hers, Mu Qingying and Mu Xiao had just succeeded in making another Peerless holy weapon. After that, Mu Qingying went to take a shower, washing away the sweat which had stained her skin from a long night's effort. Mu Xiao was near her, taking in her beautiful hair and supple breasts. Her curvy features were even more noticeable under the moonlight. Mu Xiao suddenly became very aroused, gulping down. He got closer, taking soft steps as he tried not to startle her. He was now close enough to smell her, pushing him forward even more. Mu Qingying frowned. She knew that Mu Xiao was behind her, but she didn't think he'd be this bold. Suddenly, 2 hands grabbed her from behind and she shouted, Mu Xiao, what are you doing? Qingying, you're just too beautiful, I feel bewitched even, said Mu Xiao, firmly holding her. Mu Qingying wanted to push his hands away, but he held her firmly. Her heart started pounding. She didn't know what to do. Mu Xiao, I want to focus on the tournament, So we'll have to wait and think about our relationship until after the tournament, alright? Asked Mu Qingying. She didn't try to push him away. She just put her hands on his hands and talked using a gentle way. Mu Xiao smiled in a cold way. After the tournament? They had already gone so far. And after the tournament she'd probably get rid of him. He didn't want to gamble that, especially if he had sex with her now. She wouldn't be able to get rid of him after the tournament. Qingying, I love you so much, I promise I'll devote my entire life to you, said Mu Xiao, whispering in her ears. He didn't answer her question, because he wanted to try his luck first. Mu Qingying bit her lips. She knew what he was thinking. If she got rid of him now, she wouldn't be able to make imperial weapons. She wouldn't even be able to participate in the tournament. Mu Qingying didn't know what to do, so Mu Xiao called her out on her hesitation. With that thinking, he held her even tighter, caressing her back. Ow! Mu Qingying moaned in pain. She couldn't stop him anymore. In the distance, Mu Linshui heard her moan and looked towards them. As she did, she saw Qingying and Mu Xiao acting very intimately. Qingying, said Mu Linshui suddenly. Mu Qingying and Mu Xiao turned at the same time, both looking back at Mu Linshui. Lin Feng also woke up and looked in their direction. He instantly knew what was going on after he saw Qingying and Mu Xiao. He immediately stood up, knowing Mu Xiao wouldn't hesitate resorting to evil methods for his own interests. Even though Lin Feng didn't like Mu Qingying, he didn't want her to get raped. Mu Xiao was furious. Now he was regretting not taking Mu Qingying beforehand. Miss Lin Shui, I'm off, said Mu Xiao, bowing before Lin Shui. He could do whatever he wanted with Qingying, but not with Mu Lin Shui there. Mu Lin Shui looked at him in a despising way. Then, she looked at Qingying and said, Qingying, how come you didn't see this coming? Miss Lin Shui, Mu Qingying didn't know how to explain. It's my fault. Lin Feng warned me about him, and I should have told you. But I thought you'd notice if something was wrong. It's not too late now though. You can't let that shameless bastard bully you anymore, said Mu Lin Shui. Lin Feng. Mu Qingying was surprised, so she walked up to Lin Feng. Lin Feng had told Mu Lin Shui that Mu Xiao was shameless? He was way more shameless. Sister Lin Shui, how could you trust him? Whatever Mu Xiao does, Lin Feng must be worse. Don't let him fool you. Lin Feng was speechless. Qingying, Mu Xiao and Lin Feng can't be compared with each other, said Mu Lin Shui. How could Mu Xiao be worse than him? I helped Lin Feng join the Mu clan, and then he flirted with you. You have to be careful. Mu Qingying was still unconvinced. Even though Mu Xiao had gone too far, he still helped her make imperial weapons. Lin Shui didn't expect Qingying to react like that. Lin Shui still wanted to say something, but Mu Qingying interjected. Sister Lin Shui, don't worry. I know what I'm doing, and you know what you're doing. No matter what, Yan Feng is 100 times better than Lin Feng, so you won't have to worry much longer. With that, Qingying went back to her room. Mu Lin Shui looked at her and sighed. Yan Feng. She hadn't thought Mu Qingying would be that mean. Mu Lin Shui turned around and said, I'm sorry she offended you. Lin Feng smiled wryly and shrugged. I don't care. She's the only one who is going to suffer by not listening to us. I hope she'll find a solution. Let's go back now, sighed Mu Lin Shui, shaking her head. Mu Qingying went back to her room still angry. How could Mu Lin Shui talk to her that way? Qingying. A short time after, Mu Xiao entered Mu Qingying's room and said, Qingying, Miss and Lin Feng went too far. Surprisingly, she keeps defending Lin Feng, and she offended you. I'm alright, she said you're not as good as Lin Feng though, said Mu Qingying unhappily. But Mu Xiao didn't care about that. Rather, he walked over to her and whispered, I will always protect you and make you happy. I don't care about what other people think, as long as you love me. Mu Qingying felt nervous, but she kind of felt happy after she heard Mu Xiao. For most women, that's exactly what they wanted to hear. Suddenly, Mu Xiao put his arms around her again and said in a gentle way, Qingying, I will always protect you. Qingying shivered. She tried to move away, but Mu Xiao held her even tighter. He thought angrily, Mu Lin Shui, if I have the opportunity, I'll get you too. Surprisingly, you dared insult me. Chapter 1628. My assistant Mu Qingying's face turned pale. She tried resisting, but Mu Xiao forced her into his arms. What should I do? Mu Qingying was confused. At that moment, she really didn't know what to think. She didn't have feelings for Mu Xiao, and she only considered him an assistant. But without Mu Xiao, she wouldn't be able to make imperial weapons, and she'd lose face at the competition. How shameless! Someone shouted at that moment. Mu Xiao suddenly flung himself away from Mu Qingying. Mu Qingying was also startled, so she started running away. She looked around, but she didn't know who was talking. Qingying, who's that? Asked Mu Xiao following her. I don't know, said Mu Qingying, shaking her head. The wind suddenly felt cold now. She looked at Mu Xiao and said, Mu Xiao, I'll forget everything that happened tonight, and you can continue being my assistant. However, if you try to touch me again, I'll get angry, and I'll drop out of the tournament after letting you go. Mu Qingying wasn't stupid. She understood why Mu Xiao was acting that way. Someone had shouted, and it was her wake-up call. She knew that she couldn't sell her body to participate in the competition. She was more willing to give up if things were put that way. Mu Xiao remained silent and lowered his head, but secretly he was furious. Who was ruining his plan this time? Lin Feng, it must have been Lin Feng, thought Mu Xiao. After thinking about it, he raised his head and said, Miss Qingying, I understand. From now on I'll make sure such things won't happen again. I'll just stay with you and protect you. Mu Xiao was now pretending to be a protector. He knew that no matter what he'd say, nothing would work, so a protector was still a better status than a guard. Go and have a rest. In the future, you can't come into my room without my permission, said Mu Qingying in a cold way. Roger, Mississippi, said Mu Xiao, bowing. Then he went back to his room and closed the door. He felt like crying, but he was so angry that he couldn't do it. Lin Feng had ruined his dream of making his dream girl fall in love with him. It was either Lin Feng or Mu Lin Shui. However, the voice they had heard was a woman's voice. Just like Mu Xiao had guessed, the voice he had heard was Lin Feng's. They hadn't gone too far, so Lin Feng and Lin Shui had heard them after they left. Mu Qingying glanced around, and then went back to her room. She didn't know who had shouted, but she also thought that it might have been Lin Feng. She didn't understand why he was helping her though. Qingying is too naive and sensitive, whispered Mu Lin Shui. You guessed right, Mu Xiao really is evil. Lin Feng smiled but said nothing. He had gone through a lot in his life, so he understood people. You've probably done such things in the past too, said Mu Lin Shui, laughing. Lin Feng rolled his eyes and then smiled at her. If you think so, I can do it to you too. Mu Lin Shui smiled teasingly and said, If you do that to me, I won't reject you like Qingying rejected Mu Xiao though. Lin Feng smiled wryly. She was somewhat cold to other people, but she was kind and gentle to him. She even joked with him. But thank you, Mu Lin Shui said after she saw Lin Feng looking embarrassed. Lin Feng shrugged. He didn't mind. He didn't like Mu Qingying, but they weren't enemies either. If Mu Lin Shui hadn't cared about Mu Qingying, Lin Feng wouldn't have done anything for her. She was old enough to make her own decisions after all. Good thing she came back to her senses in the end, otherwise, nobody would have been able to help her, said Mu Lin Shui. In the following days, Mu Xiao did his best to help Mu Qingying. They focused, and with more sweat, they made another imperial weapon. On the other hand, Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui didn't make any weapons. They just chatted, laughed, sunbathed, and slept. Finally, it was the day of the tournament. Mu Lin Shui came out of her room, looking at Lin Feng, who was lying down in the grass with his eyes closed. She smiled and said, Lin Feng, the clan called everyone, so we have to go. I'm coming too, asked Lin Feng. Even though he had spent a lot of time there, he had only stayed with Mu Qingying or Mu Lin Shui. He felt like a stranger in the Mu clan. Of course, they're going to choose the people who will participate in the tournament. We're a team, so we have to go, said Mu Lin Shui, smiling. Lin Feng smiled wryly and stood up. Once again, many people were going to pay attention to him. Mu Lin Shui had a higher status in the clan, so him appearing with her might cause some issues. I have no choice then, said Lin Feng indifferently. You almost never go out. Instead you work so hard to help me. said Mu Lin Shui in a gentle way. Lin Feng's deployment spells were incredibly powerful, and he kept helping her without anyone else knowing. She almost felt guilty. She knew that if she raised these concerns he'd just say, "I don't mind being discreet." So, she didn't say anything more. Instead, the two of them walked away with Mu Qingying and Mu Xiao behind them. "Miss Lin Shui," said Mu Qingying. Mu Lin Shui turned around and smiled at Mu Qingying. "Qingying, you should come with us." "All right." Mu Qingying felt guilty because of what happened the other night. Even after that, Mu Lin Shui was still so nice to her. "Miss Lin Shui, why is he?" asked Mu Qingying, glancing at Lin Feng. "Why was he coming with her?" "He's my assistant. Of course he's coming with me," said Mu Lin Shui smiling. The tournament was going to start soon, so she no longer needed to keep it a secret. Before, she used to hide that fact because she feared someone from the clan would try to harm him. Though, if she had known how strong Lin Feng was from the beginning, she might have done everything differently. "Your assistant?" Mu Qingying looked dumbstruck. Lin Feng was her assistant? "Indeed," said Mu Lin Shui nodding. Mu Lin Shui was a genius in the clan. Her fire, her deployment spells, her weapons, everything about her was incredible. Of course, nobody thought she was stupid, so her choosing Lin Feng must have meant that. It meant that Mu Lin Shui was stronger with Lin Feng than by herself. How? Thought Mu Qingying. She was still under the impression that Lin Feng's deployment spells were very weak. Mu Qingying glanced at Mu Xiao, but Mu Xiao avoided her gaze. He looked like a child who knew he'd done something wrong, but didn't want to admit it. She had the feeling that if she asked about it, it would affect their cooperation, and he couldn't do that to Mu Qingying before the tournament. How? Could Lin Feng's deployment spells be more powerful than Mu Xiao's? Then, Mu Qingying's thoughts were chaotic. She felt like she had been fooled. On that day, Qingying had been pleasantly surprised by Mu Xiao, but maybe he had actually taken credit for Lin Feng's talisman. Chapter 1629. Goldfire Tower elders and many other people were crowded on the main square of the Mu clan. Mu Lin Shui and 3 others had arrived. Many people were looking at them, which wasn't a surprise because Mu Lin Shui was the most beautiful woman of the clan. Each time she showed up, everybody couldn't help but look at her. Of course, some people were noticing Lin Feng standing next to her. Those who did frowned. They had never seen him before. So what was he doing with Mu Lin Shui? Did it mean anything? Mu Lin Shui's uncle had seen Lin Feng, but he just thought that he was a servant. But now when he saw Lin Feng, he suddenly stood up. He walked to the edge of the battle stage and looked at them. "Lin Shui, who's that person? What is he doing here?" "His name is Lin Feng and he's my assistant," said Mu Lin Shui. Her uncle frowned and looked at Lin Feng. He had seen him a few months before when Mu Lin Shui made the level 2 imperial weapon. He had thought that Mu Lin Shui was working alone, but had that person helped Mu Lin Shui? No wonder she wasn't looking for anyone to help her. She had already found someone suitable for her, thought her uncle angrily. "You're not from the Mu clan?" "I joined the Mu clan by becoming Lin Shui's guard," replied Lin Feng smiling. "The tournament is something extremely important for us. Do you have powerful deployment spells to show us?" asked Mu Lin Shui's uncle. He wanted to check how strong Lin Feng was, and if he could really help Mu Lin Shui. "Uncle, you're asking too much. Lin Feng is my assistant and that's all. I hope you can respect my decisions," said Mu Lin Shui. She knew what her uncle was thinking. He was wanting to see if she had a chance at defeating Yin Feng. "You're going to participate in the tournament, but you're not the only one involved, and your participation will have an impact on our whole clan," said Mu Lin Shui's uncle in a cold way. "Mind your own business. Go find your daughter if you want handout advice," snapped Mu Lin Shui. "That's enough," shouted Mu Lin Shui's grandpa furiously. Her uncle turned around and walked to the other old men. Then he said, "Lin Shui is going to participate in the tournament, which is a very serious matter. With this consideration, I believe that her assistant must be experienced. First, we need to select the participants," said the main old man. His eyes were closed, and he sounded indifferent. With that, Mu Lin Shui's uncle shut his mouth. Everybody was looking at Lin Feng angrily though. Of course, Lin Feng knew that was going to happen. Now he understood why she hadn't talked about him earlier. All the members from the Mu clan finished gathering there before one of the old men stood up and nodded at the crowd. This afternoon, the tournament will be held in Goldfire City. The Mu clan is going to select 5 teams, so all those who can make imperial weapons need to step forwards now. Having the ability to make imperial weapons was a decisive factor, eliminating most of the candidates. A few people jumped onto the stage. Mu Linshui tapped Lin Feng's arm and grabbed his hand, but she noticed that his eyes were closed. "Let's go," said Mu Linshui to Lin Feng. Then he opened his eyes and followed. The crowd was wide-eyed. The most beautiful girl from their clan was holding hands with a young man. What was going on? Had she fallen in love with him because she had spent some time with him? Everybody knew that after the tournament, Mu Linshui would probably marry Yin Feng. Even though she could make level 2 imperial weapons, she still couldn't beat Yin Feng. But surprisingly now, she was holding hands with another young man. Mu Qingying and Mu Xiao were behind them, also dumbstruck. Were Lin Feng and Mu Linshui that close? 16 people, 8 teams, 30 years old and under, all able to make imperial weapons. Of course, they weren't the only ones, but they had the highest potential with those requirements. "Master, how can we be sure we chose the right people?" asked someone to the old man who had his eyes closed. Only 5 teams could join in the tournament, so 3 teams had to be eliminated. The old man opened his eyes and looked at the teams. Tap, tap. 2 people from different teams took a step backwards. The old man looked at them and said, "If you can't stand the pressure, you can't become weapon manufacturing masters. Those 2 teams must leave." "Master, it's not my fault," said a young man. His assistant was one of the 2 who had stepped away. "Since you chose your assistant, you must bear responsibility for what he does," said the old man strictly. Now 6 teams were left, so only 1 more had to be eliminated. "Show us the best imperial weapons you've made," said the old man to the teams. Then they took out imperial weapons and gave them to the old man. Only 2 weapons were level 2 imperial weapons, while the rest were all level 1 imperial weapons. One of them belonged to Lin Feng and Mu Linshui, while the other one belonged to another team, a young man and a young girl, who were Mu Linshui's uncle's children. The old man looked at the imperial weapons and gave them back to the potential participants. He looked at 2 of them and said, "Your imperial weapon was the weakest. Leave." They said nothing, bowed, and then left. Many people were going to participate in the tournament, and millions of people would probably watch. Therefore, failing before the tournament was a type of relief. Phew. Mu Qingying took a deep breath. She had passed the first test, so now she could participate in the tournament. "All right, get ready to leave," said the old man, looking at the participants in a calm and serene way. They had to hurry over to Goldfire Tower. Mu Linshui's uncle frowned. He initially wanted to cause trouble, but now he had no choice. The leader of the clan had made the decision, so who was he to argue? In any case, he was convinced that Mu Linshui and Lin Feng would fail, so he gave up worrying over it. "Even Mu Lai and Mu Yu can defeat you," thought the uncle. Mu Lai and Mu Yu were his children, so of course he gave them high praise. "Everyone should go and watch the tournament. It will be beneficial for you," said the leader of the clan. Then he rose up in the air. "Come," said the leader to Mu Linshui and the others. Mu Linshui and the others rose up in the air and everyone followed them. At that moment in Goldfire Tower, there were millions if not billions of people. They were all incredible weapons craftspeople with extraordinary statuses in Goldfire City. Who would want to miss this? Everybody was excited. Even people from other cities and regions came to watch. For example, there were some people from Sword Mountain there. Chapter 1630. Challenge. There were many people from the powerful sects and clans of Goldfire Tower, greeting the members of the Goldfire Tower in front of the main stage. They all wore special robes with different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, golden red, golden purple. 9 different colors which each represented different social statuses. Those who were wearing red were level 1 professors. Those in orange were level 2 professors. Those in golden red were level 8 professors. Those in golden purple were level 9 weapon manufacturing masters. There was only one person wearing a golden purple robe. At that moment, the old man in the purple robe was chatting with some people happily. That weapon manufacturing master looked at a young man in a gentle way and smiled. Yinfeng, you already received the teaching from Goldfire Tower. You're a level 2 professor already, and someday, I'll be your teacher. I'm sure that within 3 years, you'll be a level 5 weapon manufacturing master. Yinfeng wore a Goldfire Tower robe, and it was orange. That was an honor to him. He felt proud to wear that robe. Soon, he'd become wearing a yellow robe. Master, you're flattering me. I will do my best to make you proud, said Yinfeng politely. He was happy that a level 7 professor was flattering him. But who wouldn't? Haha, little boy, I'm sure you won't let me down, said the old man smiling. I've heard that you have an agreement with the Mu clan. Is that true? Indeed. Mu Lin Shui is the most beautiful girl of the Mu clan, and she's a very talented weapon craftswoman. If I win, we'll get married, said Yinfeng. You're a good boy. Heroes love beautiful women, so this is only normal. I've heard of her, and I think you two would be a good match. I support you in this, said the old man smiling. Thank you, master, said Yinfeng. Yinfeng, how come you're saying master? Asked an elder. Yinfeng bowed before the old man and said, I'm not a powerful weapon craftsman yet, so I must be polite. I wouldn't dare tarnish elders' reputation. When I become strong enough, things will change. Haha, I like you more and more, little boy, said the old man in the purple robe. It was as if Yinfeng had already become a protagonist of Goldfire Tower. Master, I need to get ready for the tournament, said Yinfeng politely. The old man in purple clothes nodded. Go, don't disappoint us. I won't, said Yinfeng, walking away and smiling. The Mu clan is here, said a member of the Yin clan who was gazing into the distance. Let's go and greet them, said an old man from the Yin clan smiling. Just after he said that, the Mu clan landed. Brother Mu, I trust you have been doing well since we last met, said the leader of the Yin clan smiling. You're early, said the leader of the Mu clan smiling. Even though he was smiling, it was difficult to see what he was really thinking. Let's go and have a chat. Yinfeng and Lin Shui haven't seen each other for a while, so let's leave the young people alone, said the leader of the Yin clan. It sounded like he was forcing them, leaving the leader of the Mu clan in a position where he couldn't refuse. Yinfeng went to Mu Lin Shui. Lin Shui, it won't be long before you become my wife, said Yinfeng. He had been waiting for this day for a long time now. You're ridiculous, said Mu Lin Shui in a cold way. You have no choice because you're absolutely going to lose. And after that, you'll become my wife, and we will live together, said Yinfeng. Then he looked at Lin Feng, instantly looking furious. I remember back then, I told you not to stand next to my wife, said Yinfeng coldly. He's my assistant, and we're going to participate in the tournament as a team. Mu Lin Shui retorted. He can't be your assistant, said Yinfeng coldly. Then he looked at Lin Feng and said, Talk. Lin Feng frowned and asked Mu Lin Shui. Lin Shui, is it safe to be here at the Goldfire Tower? The Yin clan was in the northern part of Goldfire City, and they had a lot of influence. So, Lin Feng had to make sure that they wouldn't have another run-in, as they did in the marketplace. Goldfire Tower guarantees the safety of those who rank in the top 10, said Mu Lin Shui. Goldfire Tower was an important institution in Goldfire City, so if anyone got hurt in one of their tournaments, then they might lose participants in future competitions. Therefore, the rule was that those who ranked in the top 10 couldn't be killed, otherwise, they'd become enemies with Goldfire Tower. Oh, Lin Feng nodded and smiled at Yinfeng indifferently. Piss off. Yinfeng was astonished. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Lin Feng was telling him to piss off? In the northern part of Goldfire City, nobody has ever told me to piss off, even in the entire city, said Yinfeng provocatively. Just who did Lin Feng think he was? Lin Shui, let's go, said Lin Feng, smiling at Mu Lin Shui. Then he stretched out his hand and grabbed hers. Right. Mu Lin Shui smiled in a resplendent way and held hands with Lin Feng. Then, they passed in front of Yinfeng and walked away. Yin Feng was furious. He was proud, and Lin Feng had ignored him. Besides, he was taking his future wife away. When the crowd saw Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui holding hands, they finally understood what was going on. Who's that? He dares flirt with Yin Feng's future wife. They thought. Yin Feng understands cosmic energies already. It won't be long before he breaks through to the Huangqi layer. Thought more people. Members from the Yin clan frowned. Some of them even looked upset. Brother Mu, why are your people humiliating Yin Feng? Asked the leader of the Yin clan in a cold way. Lin Shui, shouted the leader of the Mu clan. Mu Lin Shui turned her head and said, I know what I'm doing, and will bear responsibility for my actions. If the Mu clan wants to expel me, then I won't object. Mu Lin Shui had waited for that day for a long time, just like Yin Feng. She knew how strong Lin Feng was when it came to deployment spells, so she didn't care about the Mu clan's influence anymore. You, the leader of the Mu clan, was furious. He glanced at Lin Feng and said, You're shameless. Mui's request is difficult, thought Lin Feng. Because of Mu Lin Shui's social status, saving her was becoming even more difficult. He had to rank in the top 10, otherwise nobody would protect him. Not to mention he had to beat Yin Feng. I've always been audacious, said Lin Feng, shrugging. He didn't know what else to say at this point. The tournament hadn't even started, he had already offended 2 groups. It's almost as if he was cursed to upset other people. Boom! A terrifying fire started burning on Yin Feng's robes. He was standing in the sky above Lin Feng, just 1 step away from killing him. Lin Shui, what is he doing? Asked Lin Feng, pointing at Yin Feng. I don't know, said Mu Lin Shui, shrugging. They looked at Yin Feng, just like they'd look at a monkey in a zoo. Chapter 1631. The Great Tournament. Mu Lin Shui was pleasantly surprised. She didn't realize that Lin Feng could have a sense of humor in such worrying circumstances. Yin Feng wanted to scare him, and had provoked him, but it hadn't worked, and now Yin Feng looked like a buffoon. Yin Feng was furious. He released more energies, but nobody paid attention to him. He slowly recalled his cosmic energies and said coldly, Mu Lin Shui, you will regret that. After the tournament, when we get to the Yin clan, nobody will be able to save you anymore. And you, said Yin Feng, turning to Lin Feng. You don't even know what you did to yourself now. Lin Shui, let's go, said Lin Feng, smiling at Mu Lin Shui. No need to waste their breath with him. All right. Then the 2 of them held hands and walked away. Was he really going to get married with the most beautiful lady from the Mu clan? From everybody else's perspective, she was holding hands with another young man. Who's that guy? He's got some balls to upset Yin Feng. Some people thought. Lin Feng didn't have time to think about those things. It wouldn't be long before they were going to start the tournament. That's Seaman Nan from the eastern part of the city. It is said that he's already a level 2 professor. The only thing is that he hasn't come to the Goldfire Tower yet, so they haven't been able to check. Some people were talking about 2 people who were approaching. Seaman Nan from the eastern part of the city, Guqing Feng from the western part, Yin Feng from the northern part, and Henchang Tian from the central part. They were the most talented people of their generation. Mu Lin Shui wasn't just talented, she was also very beautiful. When Mu Lin Shui saw Seaman Nan, she said to Lin Feng, That's Seaman Nan. He's one of the 4 most talented weapon craftspeople in Goldfire City. But he's discreet, so nobody really knows how strong he is. I'm guessing that he's at least as strong as Yin Feng. All right. Lin Feng nodded. It seemed like making a level 2 weapon wasn't enough to rank in the top 10 at the event. Guqing Feng is here too. He's a genius from the western part, said Mu Lin Shui. Guqing Feng was wearing silver clothes, and he looked majestic with the wind blowing his robes against him. He silently landed on the area after she identified him to Lin Feng. Lin Feng glanced around, watching everybody arriving. Lin Feng, look, said Mu Lin Shui, pointing at the main bleachers. Those people are weapon craftspeople from the Goldfire Tower. The colors of their robes indicate their level. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, golden, red, golden, purple. Of which, those colors respectively mean level 1 to level 9. Lin Feng glanced at them. There was only one person who was wearing a golden purple robe. 3 people were wearing golden red robes. 7 people were wearing purple clothes. And most of them wore blue and cyan robes, which meant that there was mostly level 5 and 6 professors. Suddenly, a sword whistled, and everybody looked up to see several strong cultivators riding a magnificent silver sword. That must be Sword Mountain, thought everybody. The cultivators descended from the sky and went to the bleachers where the Yin clan was. It wasn't just Sword Mountain. Many external forces arrived and sat with the weapon manufacturing groups they worked with. So many people, thought Lin Feng. He was surprised to see so many people gathering for this single event. A professor in a yellow robe arrived. Although he was a level 3 professor, he still looked quite young. Henchang Tian. Mu Lin Shui pointed him out for Lin Feng and said, Henchang Tian is a disciple of Goldfire Tower. His weapon manufacturing abilities are terrifying, as he's already a level 3 professor. Being a level 3 professor was nothing exceptional, but Henchang Tian was so young. So it was amazing given his age. Only those who were 30 years old and under could participate in the tournament, and Henchang Tian was no exception. He came alone. Mu Lin Shui noticed. He must be confident. Of course, Henchang Tian was a level 3 professor, so it was probably difficult for him to find an assistant who wasn't older than 30 and was still strong enough to help him. Sister Lin Shui. At that moment, Mu Qingying and Mu Xiao weren't far from Lin Shui and Lin Feng. The Mu clan was there with them, but they looked depressed. What's wrong, Qingying? Asked Mu Lin Shui. There are so many people, I'm very nervous, said Mu Qingying, smiling embarrassedly. The Mu clan was under a lot pressure now. Mu Lin Shui smiled and said, Relax, you have nothing to lose. Mu Lin Shui said that even though the pressure was so much worse for herself, there were actual consequences for her if she lost. At that moment, Mu Lin Shui sensed that someone was looking at her. She looked to her side and saw Yin Feng. Apparently, he was going to be fabricating weapons not that far from her. At the same time, the 7 professors who wore purple robes rose up in the air and looked at the crowd. Everyone raised their heads and saw that the sun was directly above them, indicating that it was high noon already. After choosing your place, you cannot move again. You must be at least 10 meters away from the other contestants as well, said one of them to the crowd. The first round will last for an hour. If you fail to make a weapon, you'll be eliminated. Also, you'll be eliminated if you don't make an imperial weapon. When you leave, don't disturb anyone around you. You'll only have one opportunity. People had prepared themselves for this, but hearing it now made them feel nervous. Only one opportunity, and if they didn't manage to make an imperial weapon, they'd be eliminated. This time, the test was about determination and the ability to make weapons, so failing was forbidden. Now start making weapons, shouted the weapon manufacturing master. Phew, Mu Qingying took a deep breath. With Mu Xiao, they still couldn't manage to make imperial weapons every time, only sometimes. But no matter, they couldn't fail this time. They glanced at Mu Lin Shui and Lin Feng. Mu Lin Shui had already taken out a cauldron and materials, and she was starting the fire. She had prepared everything, and just making an imperial weapon was already easy for her and Lin Feng. The first round shouldn't be a problem for them. Good luck, but remember that if you fail you'll be mine, said Yin Feng in a cold way, taking out his own things. Chapter 1632. First round. Yin Feng was using an ancient snake cauldron, which had snakes and dragons carved on it. After he released his fire, Lin Feng was surprised to see a powerful fire cosmic energy burning. It was fierce, brutal and wild. The fire he uses is a green-scaled snake fire. The Yin clan killed some green-scaled snake emperors for him, and stole their cosmic fire to improve his own, said Mu Lin Shui to Lin Feng using telepathy. Lin Feng smiled wryly. Disciples from rich families seem to always be spoiled. Their families spent a lot of money for them, and Yin Feng was no exception. Lin Feng noticed that many other people had special types of fire as well, especially the other geniuses. Henchang Tian specifically caught his eye with his golden fire. That tournament wasn't fair at all. Mu Linshue's fire and cauldron weren't bad, but their quality was much lower than everyone else's. Yin Feng glanced at Lin Feng. Seeing how the first round wasn't that difficult, he didn't need to focus that much. After a short time, Yin Feng shouted at the person who was with him, "Carve the marks." His assistant was a girl wearing black clothes. She wasn't as beautiful as Mu Linshue, and her chi was very cold. However, she was an expert at carving marks, and her speed was noteworthy. Very quickly, a sword started whistling above Yin Feng's cauldron. Feng is already a master when it comes to making swords, so the first round should be extremely easy for him, said the leader of the Yin clan, smiling. Yin Feng was the fastest one. He doesn't even need to try this round, said a strong cultivator from Sword Mountain. All the cultivators from the Yin clan focused on swords because they cooperated with Sword Mountain. Mu Linshue is shameless. I wonder if she should even become Yin Feng's wife, said the leader of the Yin clan in a cold way. Mu Linshue and Lin Feng seemed to have an intimate relation. How could Yin Feng want a woman who was sleeping with other men? How could she even act proudly and arrogantly like that? Yin Feng's sword whistled in the air. Then a few seconds later, Hen Chong Tian and the others also finished making their imperial weapons. One of the 7 purple-clothed strong cultivators from Gold Fire Tower smiled. How will those 4 rank in your opinion? No idea. In terms of level, Hen Chong Tian could be the strongest one, but he's making weapons alone. Yin Feng and the others have assistants, so it's much easier for them, said another one, smiling. They didn't care if anyone could hear them. I think Yin Feng is the best. He makes quality weapons, his fire is great, and he is the fastest. I think he might rank first, said another one, smiling. It was the guy who wanted Yin Feng as his disciple. Guqing Feng is not a weakling either, said another one, smiling. Let's see. We won't learn much in the first round after all. Maybe some of them will make level 4 imperial weapons later, said one of them, his eyes were twinkling. Indeed. Look at that girl, the one from the Mu clan. She's good, but her fire, cauldron and pace aren't as good as Yin Feng's. However, the young man next to her is good. They could rank in the top 10 if they work together. After all, she's already a level 2 professor, said another master wearing purple clothes. Hee, that girl is going to become Yin Feng's wife, said Yin Feng's future teacher. They all smiled at him and said, You already know Yin Feng's attitude, but if she does rank in the top 10, and doesn't want to get married with Yin Feng, then nobody will be able to force her. Yin Feng's future teacher looked surprised. Indeed, if she managed to rank in the top 10, then Gold Fire Tower would have to protect her. But the Mu clan and the Yin clan have an agreement, so you're not quite right. Besides, it's too early to talk about that now. First, she has to rank in the top 10, said Yin Feng's future teacher. Even though he wasn't Yin Feng's teacher yet, he already considered himself as such. We'll see, said another one, smiling. At that moment, Lin Feng rose up in the air and started carving deployment marks. It was nothing too difficult for him, as he was using a shattering spell. That team is great. That boy's deployment marks are perfect for Mu Linshue, thought the professor, who thought highly of Mu Linshue and Lin Feng. He wasn't the only one to think that way. Some of the other professors were also pleasantly surprised. Yin Feng looked at his assistant, the girl in black clothes, and asked, What do you think of her? Yin Feng looked angry, asking, but he still wanted to compare himself to them. She's all right. I'm not amazed, but she's not bad either. I don't think they can win, at least, said the girl wearing black clothes. Yin Feng nodded. He didn't think about it too much after that. Lin Feng's deployment marks weren't too complex. It was only the first round, and making an imperial weapon was the only requirement. After carving the marks, he started hammering the weapon. Finally, they made a sword, an imperial weapon. The Mu clan watched as the sword rose up in the air. They were surprised. Mu Linshue's assistant wasn't bad. There were no mistakes in his deployment marks. But they still felt uneasy. Just where did Lin Feng come from? And who was he? In any case, it was far from being enough. To rank in the top 10, they had a long way to go still. Even though it was only the first round, the crowd had already noticed many geniuses. Mu Qingying didn't pay attention to anyone else. Her forehead was already covered in sweat. She was using her full strength to make that imperial weapon. Mu Xiao and Mu Qingying couldn't succeed that easily, so they couldn't afford to get distracted. In the end, they did succeed in making an imperial weapon. Afterwards, Mu Qingying looked very happy. Chapter 1633. Fabrication speed. We did it. I can move on to the next round, thought Mu Qingying, looking at her weapon which was floating in the air. She then glanced at Mu Linxue and Lin Feng. They had finished before her, and were patiently waiting. Lin Feng fooled me, thought Mu Qingying, glancing at Lin Feng. Back when he first joined the Mu clan, he hadn't said much, and he looked ordinary. But he was actually so good at carving deployment marks and casting deployment spells. He couldn't be any worse than Mu Xiao in fact. Miss Lin Shui, good luck. I'm sure you can rank in the top 10, said Mu Qingying to Mu Lin Shui smiling. Thanks, you too. Your weapon is not too bad, so you should relax, said Mu Lin Shui smiling. Mu Lai and Mu Yu groaned coldly and said, with just you guys, we're the only ones who will be able to make the clan shine. Mu Lin Shui glanced at Mu Lai and smiled indifferently. Don't worry. In the future, nobody will try to steal your resources in the Mu clan. At least I won't. Mu Lin Shui's uncle wanted her to leave the clan and hand her over to the Yin clan because of his own children. They were talented, so he wanted the Mu clan to focus on them. Mu Lin Shui was a problem, but if she left, his children would become the geniuses of the clan. Then they would get all the resources from the clan for themselves. Because of this, Mu Lai and Mu Yu considered Mu Lin Shui as their enemy. You are aware of what you're worth, that's good. When you go to the Yin clan in the future, you won't have problems anymore. Of course, since your assistant humiliated the Yin clan, maybe they will reject you instead, said Mu Lai smiling mockingly, trying to infuriate Mu Lin Shui. Mu Lin Shui looked at him in a cold way, but Lin Feng smiled and said, Lin Shui, don't waste your time talking to them. It's obvious that they have no values. All right. Mu Lin Shui nodded and ignored Mu Lai. You've got a big mouth. Just wait and see. We'll know soon if you have the skill to back up your words, said Mu Li. At that moment, the 2 hours had already passed. One of the purple-clothed professors jumped forwards and shouted, those who aren't done can stop. You're eliminated, so you can leave. You were too slow. Many people left disappointed. Half of the participants had already been eliminated from the first round. The purple-clothed professor glanced at the remaining people, noting that there were a few thousand left. Then he said, all right, get ready for the second round. You have 2 hours again. During the second round, you can fail and try again if you finish within the allocated time, but only those who can make level 2 imperial weapons can move on. The maximum number of people who can move on to the next round will be 100. Therefore, the faster you are, the better. Everybody listened calmly. They weren't surprised, because they knew that thousands of people were too much to work with. Level 2 imperial weapon, whispered Mu Qingying to herself. She smiled wryly. It seemed that the first round was her limit. She couldn't make a level 2 imperial weapon. On top of that, only the first 100 people could succeed. The second round starts now, said the purple-clothed professor before he jumped back. Scorching hot flames appeared all around. The participants couldn't waste time during the second round, so they all pushed their flames immediately. Lin Shui, make a sword, and use the best materials. I'll change the deployment spell to accommodate, said Lin Feng to Mu Lin Shui. They had already talked about the tournament, but they hadn't discussed the details of the second round. In any case, they didn't lack good materials. All right, I'll listen to you, said Mu Lin Shui smiling at Lin Feng. She was extremely nervous already. Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui hadn't made that many level 2 imperial weapons. Of course, she didn't have any doubts about Lin Feng's abilities to cast deployment spells, or her own abilities. If they focused, a level 2 imperial weapon shouldn't be a problem. The 7 purple-clothed professors glanced at the crowd and smiled. You said Mu Lin Shui was good? But Yin Feng has already released half of the fire required, while Mu Lin Shui just started releasing her fire. Another professor was looking at them and smiling. Speed and power are two different things. She is slower than Yin Feng. But that doesn't mean she isn't as talented as him. This just means that she doesn't have the same advantages. Alright, let's wait and see, said Yin Feng's future professor, smiling indifferently. That round was more intense than the first round. Almost all the contestants were covered in sweat. Boom! Explosions sounded as a cauldron filled with materials exploded. The two participants were shaking violently. Their soul strength wasn't enough, and they hadn't been able to stand the fire. They smiled wryly and stopped. They instead decided to watch the others, hoping to learn something from them. Mu Qingying was nervous. Her throat was completely dry, she felt exhausted, and she looked desperate. With Mu Zhao's deployment spells, we can't possibly make a level 2 imperial weapon. We should just give up too, thought Mu Qingying. Then her fire disappeared. Mu Xiao suddenly looked at her and said, Miss, we participated in the tournament, which is good already, but we can't possibly pass the second round. Let's just watch the others instead. Mu Qingying was exhausted. She looked at Mu Lin Shui. Lin Feng was already carving deployment marks, and a sword shape had already formed. Those deployment marks are so complex. Mu Xiao couldn't possibly carve such marks, thought Mu Qingying, stupefied. She was very unhappy, thinking that such an incredible deployment spell caster had spent time with her, and she hadn't realized. Even the first time she had seen Lin Feng, she told him that his deployment spell wasn't good enough. Lin Feng had never tried to defend himself in front of her. Just like he had said several times now, he hadn't joined the Mu clan for her. At that moment, Lin Feng was very focused. His carved deployment marks were intertwining in complex ways. What a powerful deployment spell. If Lin Shui doesn't make any mistakes, managing to make the weapon fuse together with the marks, then they will succeed in making a level 2 imperial weapon, thought Mu Qingying. She seemed awestruck. Mu Xiao didn't look so happy. He knew Lin Feng was good, but he didn't know Lin Feng was that good. Those deployment marks are incredible. I wonder how many small deployment spells they contain, thought the professor, who had previously thought highly of Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui. He looked pleasantly surprised. He found nothing to criticize, as the marks were precise, distinct, clear, perfect. Good! Shouted the professor next to him loudly. Yin Feng rose up in the air, having already made a level 2 imperial weapon. He was the first one to succeed even. Haha, good, good! People from the Yin clan stood up, feeling immense pride. Yin Feng also looked proud and arrogant. Then he turned to Mu Lin Shui and Lin Feng. Lin Feng was now hammering the weapon. You overestimated yourself. I will take Mu Lin Shui in my arms, and you will stand there watching us, thought Yin Feng angrily. Suddenly, someone else rose up in the air. It was Hen Chong Tian. He had also made a level 2 imperial weapon. Chapter 1634. End of the second round. After Hen Chong Tian, Si-Man Nan and Guqing Feng finished their weapons. Even though it was difficult to say how strong someone could really become at their age, it was obvious that Hen Chong Tian and the three others had the most potential. The crowd in the Yin clan's bleachers were smiling happily. They chatted with the strong cultivators from Sword Mountain. On the Mu clan's side, some people looked upset, while some only frowned. Only the leader of the Mu clan looked indifferent, calm and serene. Nobody could guess what he was thinking. With that speed, they can probably finish in the top 100 this round, but they won't rank in the top 10 in the third round, thought Mu Lin Shui's uncle, looking at Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui. At least he hoped Mu Lin Shui wouldn't rank in the top 10 in the next round. More and more people managed to make level 2 weapons. The participants who weren't done were getting more nervous. The ground would shake every now and then as cauldrons exploded. It was easy to make mistakes, especially under such pressure. Even some participants who were outstanding were so nervous that they made mistakes. Some who failed tried again, but they had less time, so it was less likely they'd make it. Since Yin Feng was already done making a level 2 imperial weapon, more people had turned to look at Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui. Mu Lin Shui and Lin Feng were still concentrating. Nobody could distract them. Their movements were perfect, as if they had been coordinating with each other for a long time already. Lin Feng finally finished hammering the weapon, so now, Mu Lin Shui was putting on the finishing touches. Relax, everything will be fine, said Lin Feng after he saw that Mu Lin Shui was sweating a lot. He whispered this in her ear while using his sleeve to wipe the sweat off her forehead. Even though Mu Lin Shui was a genius, she hadn't been through as much as Lin Feng in her life. That tournament was extremely important to her, more so than to Lin Feng. But she felt relieved to see Lin Feng so calm. She took a deep breath and continued. At that moment, the weapon manufacturing master in the golden-purple robe was sitting at the very top of the bleachers. In front of him were the three masters in golden-red clothes. One of them looked at Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui and whispered, "This time Chang Tian is working by himself." And everybody noticed Yin Feng. But there are some discreet geniuses. With his experience and advanced age, he could see through some things. People who looked ordinary were often the strongest ones. Of course, that was not guaranteed. "Who's that?" asked a professor next to the one in golden-red clothes. He was referring to Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui. "You mean that girl? I know her, she's from the Mu clan, and her name is Mu Lin Shui. She's very talented from what I've heard. The little boy from the Yin clan wants to marry her, but she doesn't want to," replied another professor, smiling indifferently. They didn't know all the young people from Goldfire City, but they knew the most famous ones, including Mu Lin Shui. "I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about the little boy next to her," said the professor, smiling. He was interested in Lin Feng. He had noticed how incredible Lin Feng's deployment spells were, not having made any mistakes. Even though he looked ordinary, he could become an incredible deployment spellcaster in the future. It was difficult to know how strong such people really were. But Lin Feng didn't look nervous at all. He even cheered Mu Lin Shui up. "I don't know, but he's just Mu Lin Shui's assistant. I don't know if he's a member of the Mu clan or not. But do you think he's that good? I can ask around for you," said another professor, smiling. "No need, I still want to watch him. What about you, buddy? Anyone worth watching?" "Haha, it's a secret," said a professor, laughing wholeheartedly. "At the end of the tournament, I'll also know who the strongest ones are. So if you say nothing now, you won't be able to choose anyone then," said the other one, laughing. 56 people are already done making level 2 imperial weapons. My fire isn't powerful enough. I still need to improve it, thought Mu Qingying. "Done," shouted Mu Lai extremely loudly. Mu Lai and Mu Yu raised their heads. They looked overjoyed. They had done it. "Good." Mu Lin Shui's uncle stood up and shouted with joy. Mu Lai and Mu Yu were a great team. They were even better than Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui. After the tournament, Mu Lai and Mu Yu would become the heroes of the Mu clan. Mu Lin Shui was calm with Lin Feng standing beside her. With him there, it was as if the outside world had nothing to do with her. She didn't rush like most others. 63 people had succeeded, and at that moment, Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui's imperial weapon rose up in the air. It was a sword. Mu Lin Shui smiled thinly. She didn't even raise her head to look at the sword. She instead turned to Lin Feng and smiled thinly. But she didn't look surprised though. "Lin Feng," said Mu Lin Shui. Lin Feng smiled. "You're not going to thank me, right?" "No, I'm just thinking, maybe we should make love at some point," said Mu Lin Shui jokingly. With that, Lin Feng smiled wryly. "Humph." Mu Lin Shui also smiled wryly after she heard that. She even stuck her tongue out. "Sister Lin Shui, congratulations," said Mu Qingying. She admired Mu Lin Shui. Even though she had given up during the second round, she felt even more determined after watching Mu Lin Shui. "Someday you'll do it too," said Mu Lin Shui, smiling at Mu Qingying. Mu Qingying nodded and looked at Lin Feng. He looked calm, as if they hadn't worked so hard. "It's almost the end. You'll definitely rank in the top 10, Sister Lin Shui," said Mu Qingying. "Top 10? Mu Lai groaned coldly and said, "You ranked 64 in the second round. How could you rank in the top 10, you morons?" Mu Lin Shui calmly glanced at Mu Lai, but said nothing. To her, Mu Lai and Mu Yu were insignificant. "Hee Lin Shui, you're soon going to join my clan soon," said Yin Feng. Mu Lin Shui glanced at him mockingly. She didn't even reply to him. No matter what he said, she despised him. When the 100th team rose up in the air, one of the professors in purple stood up and smiled. "All right now, Those who have been eliminated can move away. Many people then left. Very quickly, only 100 people were left on the stage. The tournament was nearing its end. Chapter 1635. The prizes. The crowd looked at the participants. Initially, there were dozens of thousands of people. Now there were 100 only. Maybe in a few years later, they'd be incredible heroes. The last part of the tournament would be an opportunity for them to rise. At the same time, the 7 professors in purple clothes walked forwards and said, "Before we start the finals, the professor in golden purple clothes has an announcement to make concerning the prizes." The crowd grew excited, especially considering that Goldfire Tower was the richest group in Goldfire City. They probably had anything anyone could want. The level 9 professor slowly walked forwards with the 3 professors in golden red robes following him. They looked at the young people and smiled in a gentle way. "Hello, masters." The young people all bowed respectfully as a sign of respect. Those professors were already terrifyingly powerful. Those were probably already at the top of the Huangqi layer. "You're too polite. You're all outstanding young people. And if you continue making great efforts, then you'll be like us in the future, perhaps even surpassing us," said the level 9 professor smiling. "I'll be managing the finals," said the level 9 professor smiling. "The winners of the tournament will obtain a special fire. Our group Goldfire Tower killed a 9-headed snake, which can swallow animals' fire. As such, medium-level emperors or below can't possibly stand that fire. If they get attacked by it, they could only die. We took that fire, and it will act as the first prize of this tournament," said the level 9 professor. "A 9-headed imperial snake and a high-level emperor. If I could get it, I'd be able to make even better weapons. I could also easily kill most of my enemies," thought everybody. They calmed down again very quickly though. Very few of them thought that they could rank in the top 10, let alone first. "I must get that fire," thought Yin Feng. His eyes were twinkling with greed. He smiled and thought, "This time, I'll go back with a beautiful girl and a wonderful prize." Alright, that fire is for the first place winner. The second place winner will obtain an armor, a level 7 imperial weapon. This armor can protect anyone from a medium-level emperor or below, said the level 9 professor. That item was priceless. The third prize is a level 7 imperial weapon, but it's an offensive weapon. A level 7 imperial weapon again. The prizes are even better than 30 years ago, thought some older people who had watched the last tournament. Those who rank 4th and 5th will obtain a level 6 imperial weapon, and those who will rank 6th to 10th will obtain level 5 imperial weapons. I don't need to tell you what they are. You will just have to wait and see, said the weapon manufacturing master in the golden purple clothes smiling. Apart from that, the first 10 will be protected in Goldfire City. You must understand what that means. If you attack someone who ranks in the top 10, you will become an enemy of Goldfire Tower. Besides that, I have some good news. The very best ones will have the opportunity to study with one of the 3 teachers wearing the golden red clothes for a year. Of course, if your relationship evolves and you become their disciples, I will only be very happy to hear it. Learning from level 8 teachers. Many people were overly excited at this point. However, if one of them notices one of you, they can also choose you, and if you agree, you can become their disciple. I don't need to explain that. No matter, you are free to do whatever you want, said the level 9 professor smiling. Finally, the top 10 participants or those I choose will have the opportunity to directly become members of Goldfire Tower, said the level 9 professor. Everybody smiled and nodded. Then he moved back as it was time to start the finals. Chapter 1636. Gradually showing their talent, so many prizes, thought the crowd sighing. Those who ranked in the top 10 would get so many things, especially the very best ones. Yin Feng had shown how strong he was in the second round, so he would probably rank first. Guqing Feng and Seaman Nan were also very strong. The level 9 professor and the professors in the golden red robes went back to their seats. The level 7 professor in purple clothes was still in the air as he said, "You have 8 hours for the third round. You can fail, but in those 8 hours you need to show your best imperial weapon. With that, we'll consider your best weapon for the ranking. 8 hours. They had so much time. Now, the finals can start, said the 7 professors in purple clothes at the same time. The 100 remaining participants immediately put their cauldrons on fire after they announced the start. Phew. Mu Linxue took a deep breath. Everything they had done so far had all led up to this moment. Her fate depended on the finals. Even though she had started to relax in the second round, she was starting to get very nervous again. It'll be fine. We definitely have a chance to rank in the top 10, said Lin Feng gently. Mu Linxue nodded. Finishing in the top 10 wouldn't be a problem, but maybe that wouldn't be enough. Let's start. This time, Mu Linxue took out a black iron meteorite, which looked incredibly dense. It also had a silvery outline. Sister Linxue took out a meteorite. That material is extremely hard, so she'll need a lot of time to burn it correctly, thought Mu Qingying. In the next 8 hours, she'd only be able to try 3 times with that material. Mu Qingying glanced at Yin Feng. He was using a red stone, but she didn't know what it was. Even though he hadn't started making a weapon yet, she understood it was a fire-type material. Mu Qingying had guessed right. Mu Linxue closed her eyes and controlled her fire with her soul. It took her an hour to get the meteorite to melt. She was already covered in sweat and looked exhausted with that. Lin Feng closed his eyes. He just had to wait, and then he'd be able to carve in the marks. Yin Feng is using the 9-weapon transformation technique, and he's already finished the 3rd transformation. He will probably succeed with the 4th one too, said a strong cultivator from Sword Mountain. The 9-weapon transformation technique can improve the general level of the materials, but more importantly, it allows a cultivator to control the process even better by making their soul and the weapon fuse together. The chances of success are greatly increased whilst using that technique, said the leader from the Yin clan, smiling happily. The 9-weapon transformation technique was a technique which was passed from generation to generation in the Yin clan. They only had a part of the ancient scriptures, but it was already enough to make ordinary stones become gold. They had a saying in the clan: the 9-weapon transformation technique could make emperors become great emperors. Indeed, it's practically guaranteed that Yin Feng will rank first this time, said a cultivator from Sword Mountain, smiling. Mu Linxue continued controlling her fire, having made no mistakes so far. The embryo of the weapon had already appeared, and the outline of a spear was forming. A spear? The members of the Yin clan smiled coldly. They didn't have a lot of space to work with, so it was difficult to carve marks into them, and spears weren't considered special weapons either. Besides, at the same level, they weren't necessarily any better than other weapons. That was probably a bad choice on their part. She already gave up on the inside, thought Mu Linxue's uncle, smiling coldly. The one you like sucks. Surprisingly, she's only making a spear. She can't rank in the top 10 with that, said Yin Feng's future teacher, laughing. The one who liked Lin Feng and Lin Xue frowned. He was just as surprised as everyone else to see that the embryo had a spear shape. Carving marks into such a weapon wouldn't be easy, especially seeing how the embryo of the spear Mu Linxue was making looked even more complex than an ordinary spear. It was more precise and more detailed. The masters of Goldfire Tower all had someone who had attracted their attention. Apart from those in purple, one master in a golden red robe was paying attention to Mu Linxue. He was pleasantly surprised. He smiled and thought, finally, we're going to see his real strength. He had been paying attention to Lin Feng the entire time, but he found Lin Feng too mysterious. Lin Feng, said Mu Linxue, opening her eyes. Lin Feng suddenly opened his eyes. He looked determined. Suddenly, a terrifying chi surrounded him, along with dazzling lights. Earth abstruse energies emerged from his hands as he started carving marks. The space around him shook violently as marks started appearing. Apart from earth abstruse energy, he also used immortal abstruse energy to carve. Boom! Lin Feng's hands shook, and the marks started intertwining. Empty space deployment spell. Many people were staring at Lin Feng now. Surprisingly, he was carving empty space deployment marks. ///. Lin Feng seemed like he was dancing as he carved the mark. It seemed like the more difficult the mark, the faster he moved. Bzzz. Now destructive energies emerged, and the small deployment spells started intertwining. Very quickly the deployment spells fused together. That's... Mu Qingying was astonished. Lin Feng's deployment spells were so powerful? People from the Mu clan and the Yen clan frowned. Mu Lin Shue's assistant could carve such terrifying deployment spells? Go down. Lin Feng shook his hand, and his deployment marks all crashed onto the embryo of the weapon. Those deployment marks still aren't enough, said the leader of the Yen clan, smiling coldly. However, after he said that, Lin Feng shook his hands again and continued carving empty space deployment marks. He wasn't done yet. Chapter 1637. Transformations. The leader of the Yen clan was surprised. He then added, even if you can make more deployment spells, Yen Feng is still going to rank first, or at least in the top 3, while you have no chance. Many people were finally noticing Lin Feng, but he remained calm and indifferent. Very quickly, Lin Feng carved more deployment marks which crashed onto the weapon again. Even then, Lin Feng still wasn't done. He continued carving marks again. Many people's hearts started racing at that moment. Mu Qingying was fixedly staring at Lin Feng's marks. Because the embryo of that spear was so complex, Lin Feng had to carve a wide range of deployment marks, which made things too complex and too easy to make mistakes. Lin Feng, however, did everything step by step, without making any mistakes. Mu Xiao, back then, the deployment spell you showed me was Lin Feng's. Am I right? Asked Mu Qingying, as if she had been talking to herself, but Mu Xiao still heard her and started trembling. Mu Qingying had wanted to ask that question for a while, and now that she was done with the tournament, she had no reason not to. Miss Qingying, Mu Xiao bowed. He wanted to explain, but Mu Qingying ignored him. She shook her hand and said, there's no need to explain anything. Mu Qingying now understood that Mu Xiao had fooled her and lied. Lin Feng hadn't felt the need to justify himself or explain anything because he never really cared. Mu Qingying felt ridiculous and pathetic now. She was so confident in herself. Even till now there was a part of her which thought that Lin Feng had joined the Mu clan just for her. Lin Shui, why are you better than me in everything? Am I too stupid? Thought Mu Qingying. Mu Lin Shui had immediately noticed that Lin Feng was outstanding while Mu Qingying had always thought that he was ordinary. Mu Xiao didn't know what Mu Qingying was thinking. He was too worried about his future. What would happen to him now? I knew it. That little boy is special. I'm not stupid in thinking that those two might rank in the top 10, said the professor in purple clothes who had noticed Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui before. He was smiling indifferently, but the professor next to him groaned coldly and said, do you have so much faith in those two? At the very least, I don't think they're that bad, replied the professor. The Yen clan and the Mu clan gambled with Mu Lin Shui, and Yen Feng's fate's at stake. How about we bet too? Said Yen Feng's future teacher, smiling in a cold way. Yen Feng was using the 9-weapon transformation technique, so he could probably make a level 3 imperial weapon. With that in mind, how could Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui compete with him? What do you want to bet? Asked the other one. If Yen Feng wins, you show me your weapon fabrication technique. If he loses, I'll show you mine. What do you think? Said Yen Feng's future teacher. He had always wanted to know what technique that professor used. The professor was surprised. Apparently, Yen Feng's future teacher had a lot of faith in his future student. Can I think about it more? Asked the professor, smiling indifferently. Of course you can, said the other one, smiling. He knew what the other professor was thinking. He wanted to see how far Lin Feng's deployment mark technique went. Now he paid even more attention to Lin Feng. Lin Feng was still carving empty space marks. The holy marks on the weapon were becoming more and more dazzling. He's carving a great deployment spell, using so many small deployment spells. All the while those small deployment spells are perfect for the weapon, thought the crowd. Many people had hidden their true powers, but Lin Feng was the best one so far. So, what do you say? asked Yin Feng's future teacher. The professor narrowed his eyes and stared at Lin Feng's deployment marks. He shook his head and said, "All right, I accept your bet." "Good, but don't go back on your word now," said Yin Feng's future teacher. "I never lie." "All right, everybody here is a witness." The 5 others smiled and nodded. "Haha, maybe the champion of the tournament will be Chang Tian," said another one. Chang Tian was very strong. Even though he worked alone, he had already finished making the embryo and was now carving marks. He was making a big tower which was 3 meters high and was entirely made of gold. Apparently, carving marks didn't seem to make him too tired, but he was having to carve a lot. If his golden tower had any special powers, and if he managed to make a level 3 tower, then it'd be better than most ordinary level 3 imperial weapons. That was why that professor thought highly of him. Gu Qingfeng was making a fan which contained ice-cold energies. Seaman Nan was making a pair of gigantic wings. Yin Feng's weapon was the most ordinary amongst the 4 geniuses. He was making a sword again. // At that moment 2 hours had already passed. Lin Feng seemed to have finished carving in his marks. Their weapon was still only an embryo, but its energies were terrifying. That deployment spell is explosively terrifying, thought the crowd in awe. It seems like those 2 aren't going to try a second time. They made such great efforts anyways. They couldn't possibly put as much energy in a second weapon, thought the crowd. Boom! A scorching hot fire hit the stage. Yin Feng's sword embryo was absorbing terrifying amounts of that fire. At that moment, he glanced at Lin Feng and Mu Lin Shui and said in a cold way, "You hid your real strength, but it looks like I'll still have to disappoint you." 4th transformation. With that, the bright red sword embryo's shape changed again. Its fire became even more terrifying. "Rise!" shouted Seaman Nan at that moment. His wings embryo surprisingly rose up in the air and shook. He had hidden something too. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.